Good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. We're one member short at the moment, but hopefully he'll be along. If anybody's recording? No, thanks. First order of business is the minutes for January 14th. I don't know if you've had a chance to.
Page 4, there's an incomplete sentence. That's my only comment. About 3/4 of the way down.
Mr. Daskok has asked why they don't just add this to the zoning bylaw instead of having. Do you remember what you said?
You're asking for too much. I think it instead of having a separate, an additional district.
Having a separate district?
I recall that, I believe that was the intent of the question.
Instead of having an overlay, maybe, is that?
Yeah. At our discussion at the meeting, we weren't sure what the purpose of this overlay district was. We'll hear more tonight, I gather.
Yes, that's right.
Like to make a motion to approve the minutes with any necessary amendments to the incomplete sentence from January 14, 2019.
Second,
Sign this one. Easier to copy without the stapling.
Any discussion? 28?
28th.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
19. Abstain. All right, next item on the agenda is an approval not required plan for AD Makepeace on Farm to Market Road.
Hi, good evening. I'm Bill Madden from GAF Engineering here on behalf of the AD Makepeace Company tonight, and the Form A that they presented to the planning board for endorsement. Do you want me to proceed, or do you? Okay, this is, I don't know if you're familiar, up just on the west side of Tyhonet Road, or Farm to Market Road rather, across from Crane Landing. There's a log cabin that's set back off the roadway. That's the building for which we're creating the parcel around. It's a building that's been in the Makepeace land holdings for a while. It was previously part of a larger tract of land that was owned by Fuller Hammond Creamery Company, and Makepeace acquired Fuller Hammond, I don't know, probably close to 20 years ago. Now they've decided to parcel out that building and create its own separate lot for it. It's in the R60 zoning district. It's also in the business development overlay district as well. It requires 180 feet of frontage and 60,000 square feet of land area. In order to make the land area work out, we ended up with about a little over 200 linear feet of frontage on Farm to Market Road. So we exceed the setback or the frontage requirement by a little, and the property lines have been established so that there's no non-conformity with any zoning. So it's relatively straightforward Form A plan, and I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Not leaving a lot of room to get into that Morton building.
Into which, the Morton building? The access actually comes into that end where the words existing Morton is, I think. I think that building is used by another company for storage up there in that zoning district.
Does it matter that the setback for the Morton building is only 11 feet? The sideline, what?
Side yard setback in the zoning district is 10 feet, and we exceed that by one. There's a table on the plan that indicates the setback distances. For non-residential use, it's 10 feet.
Is that the sprinkler company in there?
That was R60.
Yes.
Non-residential, okay. Where in the bylaw is that non-residential section?
I'm sorry?
Where in the bylaw is the?
I think it would be under Article 3 in the bylaw where the setback distances. I think it's 3. Maybe it's 6.
It's actually 6.
6, but I don't,
It's in the, I think, under R60. I don't have my zoning
no,
bylaw.
it's Article 6, but I don't see the 10-foot. If I gave you my book, would it help?
It's probably footnoted on there. I'll take a look.
Thank you.
If you look at the, in the middle of table 621, on page 51 of the 2018 fall edition, it has a list of, as minimum side rear setback, and a list of uses: 1 family, 2 family, other residential use, and non-residential use.
Thank you.
Questions, concerns, motions?
I move to approve the A&R plan as submitted.
Second. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? I sign this one.
Do you want me to take the Mylar?
if you want.
Rather you smudged it than me.
Yeah, when they drive fast. When we record it, I'll provide you with a copy of the recording information as well.
Next item we have is a referral to the Board of Appeals regarding a site plan review at Waterwiz.
That one has been withdrawn. As the client, the attorney for the proponent has asked for constructive approval of it. So it'll probably be a court case.
Was this a plan currently in front of Board of Appeals, or hadn't made it that far?
It is, it currently is in front of the Board of Appeals.
All right, the next item is the same, a referral on a special permit for trade routes, adult use marijuana production and manufacturing. This is also a referral to CBA.
Yeah. This is a special permit for the use being proposed.
I have some half-size plans in
Oh,
a couple of areas if you'd like them as opposed to,
Thank you.
that one.
Thank you. And I also have an orientation plan that just indicates the building with some of the other surrounding uses.
Thank you.
Okay,
Where's
ready?
yours?
I'm Bill Madden from JF Engineering. Here on behalf of Trade Routes. Also with me is Jesse Pitts. He's the owner of Trade Routes. He can answer any questions that you might have that I'm not prepared to answer adequately for you. But essentially what we're doing is a recreational marijuana facility at 6 Thatcher Lane. That's the old site of the Navionics building. The Navionics company was the company that did the navigational charts and other types of geographical mapping, mostly well known for their mapping on navigational charts. They've left the site, and Trade Routes, I think, is going to be leasing that from another associated partner in the business. But in any event, this use is allowed in the industrial district. They've already received the community host agreement from the selectman's office. They've also had I think the initial public hearing prior to moving forward with this, just to appoint essentially the people within a 300-foot radius of the site of the proposal to put the facility at that location. You might recall that there was a newer building that was constructed just below 6 Thatcher Lane. The building that was, we presented that to you folks a couple of years ago. That was the building that USDA is now occupying at the rear of the site. So this is just on the left-hand side of the cul-de-sac as you go down Thatcher Lane. existing building occupies about 17,000 square feet, and the driveway that facilitates passage into the site is just located at the end of the cul-de-sac. Essentially a common driveway of sorts between the building for the Department of Agriculture in this site. There's a 24-foot wide access driveway that comes down into the site. There's parking at the rear. What we're proposing to do is remove a portion of the parking lot and another piece of pavement in there to create room for a new building. Excuse me. The building is fully serviced with water, sewer, and fire protection. Has a couple of handicap parking spaces located here. The front entrance to be used for the facility is the same front entrance that is currently going to be used. I'll get to that in a second, but this is just the overview of the existing site. There's a small drainage basin. It's kind of not really much of a drainage basin in the rear of the property. But what we're proposing to do is to modify that site to accommodate the new use. There's also a wetland boundary on the easterly portion of the site. We show the 50-foot no activity zone as it relates to conservation, and also the 100-foot buffer zone as it relates to conservation. The filings with the Planning Board and Conservation Commission were made simultaneously. I think both hearings will be held second week in February on with the zoning board of appeals and conservation. Sheet number 4 indicates essentially the site layout and the utilities. What we did in this particular instance is not really fully understanding how the town would be moving forward with delivering customers to the site. What we thought we would do initially is show a drop-off area in the front in the event that the process over here or the delivery of customers to the site would be via other transportation from a satellite parking area. We do have the required number of parking spaces on the site to facilitate the amount of square footage that would be utilized in the dispensary area, which is roughly 1,500 square feet, and to accommodate the employees and that would be on any one shift at the facility, which is 15. On the front sheet, we show the number of parking spaces that are required for it, and I believe the total number was 16, although we provided 36 in this instance. So we have a completely separate parking area for the employees of the facility, and then we have a completely separate parking area for customers that would be located along the south side, east side of the building rather. So we indicate the 17 parking spaces there. We were seeking one waiver from the zoning board, and that was to allow us to put 17 spaces in a row without the placement of a tree. Under zoning, we're required to have 15 consecutive spaces, and then a tree must be placed there. But we're looking for relief on that, pretty much due to like snow removal activities and things of that nature. And given the limited amount of parking, we thought that it might be a fair trade-off. We have a pretty significant landscaping plan that I'll go over when we move to that sheet. But anyway, that's what we're looking to do. We have 2 handicap parking spaces proposed at the side of the building where the existing single handicap parking space is. And what we thought we might be able to do is, in the event that if the drop-off wasn't not necessary, we might want to consider using one of those handicap spaces for a van drop-off, or just eliminating the need of that drive-through in its entirety. But I thought that it just made some sense to include it at this point, seeing as that's what seems to be the case down in Barrow Life. So we show a 20-foot one-way travel way across the front of the building with an adequate drop-off at the front door for potential customers. And then in the alternative, we have 17 spaces that meets the zoning requirement. Also proposes a small 8,400 square foot addition. There's not an immediate need to build that, but while we're going through the process, we felt that it would be prudent to attempt to obtain authorization to construct that building as well as make the site improvements that we're looking to do. The site is really completely enveloped in a chain link fence. You can see from this corner of the building over there on the northwesterly side of the building, we show a chain link fence being connected to the building and then running around the perimeter of the parking lot in the building, and then tying back into to a gate that separates the customer parking from the employee parking. Then that chain link fence extends down along the employee parking area and ties back into the building. So we essentially are fencing in the entire building with the exception of this front area and the side area. We're showing a small drainage area that's to be provided to handle the runoff from the parking area. What we've shown is a small rain garden type of configuration there. Additionally, we show a group of underground infiltration units that will be used to handle or to deal with our stormwater that originates on the roof of the building. So we would be piping all of our roof runoff from the new structure and a small portion from the old structure into the existing, to the proposed roof infiltrator system on the, I guess we'll call it the west side of the building. The landscaping plan indicates the tree buffers that separates ourselves from the USDA building in the trade goods facility. Also the rain garden and the small planting island at the end of the parking aisle is pretty heavily landscaped, as is the island that separates the customer parking from the handicap parking. And then we also show some trees across the front of the frontage as well. We did lay out the roadway so that it would fit between the trees. It may not look that way, but the driveway does actually go through it. So we were hoping to flank the driveway with a couple of shade trees on each side. So that's essentially what the plan is as far as the building goes. The existing 17,000 square feet will be renovated. The insides will be renovated to accommodate the operation, which will have 1,500 square feet of retail. There'll be product processing inside the building where there'll also be a grow in there as well. So they'll take some of the product that's grown inside there, they'll process it, they'll trim it, they'll take that material and extract whatever usable pieces of product are available from that. So we're really left with an inert type of residue at the end of the day. We didn't show a dumpster on the plan because as the state requires the operator to really make all the waste product pretty much inert and not be used for anything. It needs to be mixed in with some of the, say, the soil that they grow the plant material in, some of the other debris that might find its way on the road, on the floor of the building, things of that nature. So we felt that it would be more prudent just to have that removed by a separate contractor as opposed to putting it outside in a dumpster, even though it would be behind the fence. Just thought that might be a better way of handling that. The water consumption will be limited to the the processing facility, the toilet rooms, and the facilities for the employees and customers that are in there. There will be water used for irrigation purposes. Some of that water, I think, will probably be, I don't know how we're planning to treat it, whether it's be a reverse osmosis type of system or something of that nature. But that water is going to be used for the plant material, and then there's some condensate that is generated due to dehumidification in the building. There's pretty significant HVAC system that's required to create the proper growing environment for the plants, and doesn't really yield much in the line of wastewater. The condensation from the HVAC system is really one of the largest sources of water that would be considered reusable water in the building. So a lot of that will be recaptured and reused for irrigation purposes. So the intent is to try to take all of our condensate water that we have, use that for irrigation, in addition to the water that's provided by the town. So on town sewer, there's a pump station down the end of Thatcher Lane, almost to Route 195, and the connection exists in the building, so there's no need for any new service connections to have this facility up and operating. Not sure if we would have to upgrade the water service, but that might be the only thing that is necessary. The demand was not that high, and we think that the plumbing fixtures and diversity that's associated with the use of the building would be adequate for what we need for water, so I'm not anticipating the need to change that. So that's pretty much the thumbnail sketch on what we're proposing to do, and happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Where would air handling units be placed?
Air handling units can be in the space above the
Yeah.
ceiling.
They're on the west side of the building.
The air handlings are gonna be in there,
Yes.
they're not gonna be
They're on the outside, on the west side of the building. So we're not using rooftop units. We have a lot of issues in the industry as far as air contamination goes for rooftop units. So VRF units are typically the standard in the industry, which is really a larger scale of a mini split, so to say, and it's an inch and a quarter pipe that sends the refrigerant through the building. So really what we're doing is it's a closed system. The rooms are, you don't want to bring in outside air because it's contaminated with spores, mold.
Excuse me, could you just, a little more detail about the
Please.
HVAC system?
Yes. So the HVAC system is a VRF system.
Pardon?
VRF, which is really, it's a large mini split. And what it does, it's a two-part system. You have a unit outside and you have heads inside. So the unit outside provides the airflow for inside. But what you're doing is, instead of bringing air in with typical rooftop unit, you're bringing air from the outside, and you're conditioning that air that you're bringing in from the outside. In cultivation, that's a bad rule of thumb because that air is contaminated with mold spores, and that is very bad for your unit. So the idea is, in this unit, it's a closed system. We're using a mini split VRF system, and you're conditioning the air that is already in that system.
So you're not changing the air inside?
You're not
just-
changing the air inside, you're conditioning it.
The unit on the outside is
The unit's on the
shielded?
outside.
It's covered or enclosed?
It's outside of the building. The rooftop units typically bring in fresh air, so these are closed units outside. It's a manifold type of system.
No,
So
I'm
if
asking
one of,
if they're visible from,
they are, but they would be on the borderline between our building and where the wooden boat building is, and there's a tree line there along that line. I believe it's about 30 feet that we have between us and the border. And it would be, we're debating whether we do 2 units wide or 1 unit, a longer manifold. Which is really, I'm debating that with the mechanical engineer at this moment.
don't they have to be shielded?
It's enclosed, it's not, you don't shield it too much because there's airflow through it.
No, I mean,
So we put a fence line in front of it?
There's a
so
fence
it's not a
around the
public view?
whole property,
A solid fence?
so it would be fenced in already.
That's chain link, Bill. That's
Chain
nothing-
link,
Nothing
yes.
for visibility.
No, not for visibility.
You might want to check on the visibility, because what's going to be important to the
There is a
boards-
tree line there.
What's going to be important to the boards is when you're in the way, the public way, can you see anything in the?
This is
Yeah,
more the
that's-
border between the wooden bolt building
Yeah,
in
you
our property, so you really won't see it from the road. The only person that would see it would be the wooden bolt building, and there is a tree line there. Within probably 10 feet, I would say, from their property line.
do
So
they know
there's-
this? Do they know they will be seeing this?
I don't know that they've seen this plan, no.
I
But
think,
they have been informed of this plan, yes.
okay, I would suggest that it be made known to them that they could be seeing this, and they may want you to enclose it with some
Understood.
fencing, solid fencing. Charlie, have you had a chance to review the engineering here?
No, I haven't. I just picked up the plans on Thursday, and I just got the estimate together today, which I haven't even had a chance to send in to Ken.
What is the material of the building?
Which building? Are you talking about
The
the
addition.
additional building? The steel building?
Can you show me in the bylaw where that is permitted? Because the bylaw that I have requires the exterior materials to be stone, masonry, or wood. Is there another section that I'm missing?
I don't have, I know that there's there is a section in the bylaw for industrial standards on architecture with the building.
Do they overwrite the requirement that facades of buildings, excuse me, where is it? Exterior cladding materials shall be either masonry units, stone, or wood. If there's another section, I've missed it, so I'd appreciate knowing where that is.
Well, I would have to look that up. I think that this building is just more in keeping with the types of buildings that are in the industrial park as it is right now. I don't think there are some buildings in there that have a portion of the building constructed with masonry or brick or things like that, but I think the vast majority are metal buildings, and where this is facing a cranberry bog to one side and in the rear of the building, I think that for economic reasons only, that's what we're looking at. So if we,
I think that the board is going, if I may speak, I think the board is going to require that we adhere to the bylaw. The fact that it may have been done differently in the past does not obtain. So unless there is a section in the bylaw that permits a metal exterior, such as shown, you have the option of wood, stone, or, excuse me, yes, wood, stone, or masonry. Second question, again, the section of the bylaw that I'm familiar with requires that you have a total of approximately 27, a number of windows that I don't see. Again, that's a requirement of the code. You need, at the rear, you need approximately 19 windows if they are 4 feet by 3.5, which is a reasonable size. And on each of the two sides, the long sides, you need 27 windows in each. Again, that's in accordance with the bylaw. Again, if there is a section that overrides that, I'd appreciate knowing it. Otherwise, you have to provide them.
This is Jesse Pitt speaking.
I beg your pardon?
So the way that the regulations are stated from the state, we can't have windows in a cultivation space. So that's why there are no windows in that building, because it is strictly for cultivation.
There are other ways to accomplish the look.
I'm willing to accommodate those.
I mean, you can have a window with painted window,
I'm
with
willing to
painted glass.
accommodate that. I am.
You mentioned no dumpster. What about other trash that would be generated by an operation? Is there, that you have no trash that
There will be trash, but it will be taken off-site per regulations. So really, they don't want you accumulating trash on the site. It's part of the regulations. For pest control, for multiple reasons, they really don't want you composting on site, doing, natures of that. So you really need to contract, off-site for those type of things. And we intend to do that. So we really don't want that on site.
If it's done on a daily basis or every other days, it shouldn't, we don't expect that much other than lunches, say, from some of the employees. I think that would, coffee cups, things of the like, yeah.
Thank you.
Point well taken.
Jesse, have you operated a facility like this in the past?
No, it was not legal at this point, not in this state. We have consultants that have and are directing us in the way to actually operate this thing properly and in the proper manner.
Where they operate this? Colorado?
Yeah,
California?
they are out of Colorado, correct,
So you're putting best practices in place here?
correct.
And the addition, when is the intention for the addition? Are you gonna see the success of the business first, or?
Yes. The addition is intended for year 2, and once the company is profitable and is, allowed to make that on our own, instead of, borrowing the money to do such. So yes, it's year 2, late year 2, that we intend to do the addition, unless things change.
Ken, is this the third license?
There are 3 licenses that have been issued in host community agreements by the Board of Selectmen. This is one of them.
I don't remember.
So Verilife on Main Street, Jordan Plaza, this is the third one?
Yes.
Did you get an appeal for Recovery Road? Was that going to be a use building there as well?
We don't know yet. There was,
Somebody was looking at that for testing, correct?
Testing.
or a laboratory, testing laboratory.
Testing, not non-license requirement.
It has to be licensed, just like anything else with Cannabis Control Commission by the state, if it has anything to do with marijuana.
Not retail.
Was there a distance requirement in the
For
state
retail.
law?
For retail, 1,500 feet separation between retail uses.
Okay, so a laboratory and your retail use are
Are
Two different
compatible
animals.
under the
Yes.
zoning.
And welcomed.
compatible.
Yeah, they can be
So
near each other.
does this structure have enough power feeding to it to run all this? Or are you gonna have to run new power in here?
Great question. No, we have to get a transformer put in.
Where's the transformer being placed?
It is on the same side of the building, on the west side of the building, so to say. On the side of the wooden boat, border.
Okay.
Where where the original power is coming in.
Yeah.
So that's where the gas is coming in, that's where the water is coming in, that's where the power is coming in, it's all on that side.
It's gonna be an underground feed?
The line, the pole is like literally right there, so I don't think it needs an underground feed. From what I've been told from contractors, that we could get it dropped pretty easily, it doesn't need to be an underground feed, because the pole is very close.
Close enough, okay, so no additional poles are needed.
No,
And so this gate that leads to the employee parking is an automated gate?
it's a security gate to make sure that anyone that's getting to that back parking lot is authorized to get to that back parking
So
lot.
it's a centered gate, it's gonna open and close. Has the fire department looked at this? Do they have enough room to spin around the back there?
I have not had them look at it when we can.
Yeah. Because I've been inside this building myself, that if you reduce that back parking lot, it's gonna be tight spinning a truck in that back there. So I would just encourage you to have them look at that before you make any final
Thank you.
adjustments to that. And then, I guess this is somewhat of a personal comment, but also on behalf of the board. You know, this van off-site parking, I don't think any of these plans should take into accommodation a van running here. These things are supposed to be incognito, we're not even supposed to know they exist. And the fact that we open up the Wareham Courier every week and it talks about us busing people around, and we got flashing lights up and down the Cranberry Highway, the accommodations in the structure should be built you know, after the hump is done, 6 months from now, I envision these things as 15 parking spots and people are coming and going at a regular pace here. This is not an amusement attraction that's coming into town, so I don't think we should make any exceptions or provisions for van parking unless it's part of the business. And if you're taking in that volume of people, there has to be an occupancy restriction into this. I don't know, I haven't been to this Life to see how this is operating here. There has to be a total occupancy in the structure, and what happens with these folks. So, I think if you know, with the intention of running a van and 15 parking spots and only 1,500 square feet, 1,500 square feet's only about twice this room right now. I don't know if this is being designed for anything more than 30 people at a time. I guess I would just leave it at that. It's very preliminary right now, but these are things that are coming to mind. It's all brand new. It's brand new to the state. It's gonna be the first facility of this type in this town, and I think that it's important for us to have the right aesthetic appeal to the building. The units are hidden. You should, you know, I would argue on the side of the wooden, you know, on our side of the code, because the POT unit is buildings are what USDA just built their building out of wood. You could argue the fact that the used tire place is a steel building. That was an existing building, but I would only ask that you try to cooperate with us. We're trying to set an architectural standard so that we don't end up being a village of steel buildings.
I understand.
And I know it seems like extra cost and extra effort on your part, but this switch has to happen at some point.
I understand.
And what a great example it would be, the whole adoption of the industry coming in full compliance with the code. That I would only ask you to keep an open mind as we're going through the process. That's it.
Can I reply?
Yeah, absolutely.
My only, the thing with the turnaround in front is really to accommodate the town and the people of the town to make sure there's not a ridiculous amount of traffic. And we're really trying to open the amount of point-of-sale systems to accommodate more people, to accommodate the flow of the traffic. So we are really trying to figure out how do we work with everybody to make sure that this is a smooth system. The drop-off point was really not even, it was in an idea of where we have the buses coming in, but also just in people getting dropped off, so you don't have to have as many parking spots. Somebody can get dropped off and they can go shopping in the plaza and then come pick them back up. So that was kind of our thought of the drop-off. It really could cut down on the amount of parking spaces that we actually need. We are also looking into, you know, Life did this, where they have online orders. You can't shop once you get into the store. What you order is what you get. I heard they have some issues with getting the orders right, but we have things in place to make sure that doesn't happen. So we are trying to accommodate for the traffic, and we understand, especially right there at, you know, the shopping plaza of Wareham, we know that could be an issue. We are considering.
Yeah, it's just, again, I have to study the drawings a little more. That whole cul-de-sac at the end's a little wacky. Every corner the thing's open. There's no defined entrance, departure points there. I mean, if this is not constructed right, and it does look like it's constructed properly and thoughtfully right now, but your neighbors are gonna be the first ones to make an issue of it over there at the USDA. They're gonna have 50 cars flying in and out of there every day. The first day you hold up that traffic, they'll be calling into the town hall, so.
He wants to sell me solar, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's just, what's that?
I said he wants to sell me solar, so I'm not so sure of that, but.
So, yeah, it's another, not a big fan of the use, but the building's been empty for a long time, so it's being.
And he also owns a sign that he's talked about leasing to us that is out near the road, so he is, I have talked to him over there, and I wouldn't say he's opposed.
Well, I think you have to be somewhat conservative with the signage though, right?
That's right.
This can't be any type of draw. You know, what is trade winds? I don't know. You could sell navigation equipment for all I know.
Right.
As long as you're clever about it, but.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just with respect to that drop-off, it was just one of those things that you know, when we were looking at the final set of plans before we submitted, and we, you know, the thought just came, okay, well, what are they doing down the street, and what might we get asked to do? So we thought that it might be better to put it on the plan now as opposed to being asked to put it on the plan. But, you know, the recommendation going forward to whatever recommendation you put forth to the ZBA under the site plan is something that, you know, I'm sure they'll take seriously. So just one of those things, not knowing how it's all gonna take form as time goes on. But I kind of share the same sentiment that you have, is that it's not gonna be like an amusement park and, you know, the attraction is gonna be really a retail sales point.
Yeah, and I think when there's 3 up and running in the town and more in the state, this whole formula gets diluted and it doesn't become such an attraction. However, the little town of Wareham here, the gateway to the Cape, hasn't seen the summertime surge right now. So, you know, if this remains such an attraction, the problem that we're gonna have is that whole off-ramp on the 25 there, and what happens to that whole intersection. You wouldn't think your little 1,500 square feet's gonna pull them in, but
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of people.
it's gonna pull them in, and, you know, I guess in my mind, that is the preferred exit to get to Main Street Wareham as well. So it's pulling them in both directions, so I hope the town of Wareham's planning accordingly with the Cranberry Highway there to handle the increased traffic that comes along with everything that's happening there.
And we're prepared to work with you guys as well.
All right, then we're gonna have you reconstruct the whole on-ramp.
Right into your driveway.
State's taking their time getting it
Bill
done.
will design it.
No, the little turnaround, you know, we do have public transit that we'll probably be visiting there. So I don't think it's a bad idea, regardless of whether I think as more places get open, the remote parking will be less. I hope it goes
I
away.
agree with,
I hope it goes away, because this foolishness of
it will.
busing people around is crazy.
How many jobs do you create?
Upwards of 40.
It's a 24-hour operation?
In the cultivation area, technically, yes. The retail and the front of the house, no. So, I mean, you might have a few guys working around the clock, but they're just really monitoring, maybe security, one guy in security around the clock, and a couple cultivators doing their night shifts. And that's about it.
Does this include
Most of
your
the
lighting
traffic is during the day, during operating hours of the retail store.
Does this include an external lighting plan for the property? Do you have parking lights and,
I think that we're limiting the lighting to essentially what was going to be placed on the outside of the building. I didn't notice any light bases out here, but, you know, we thought that we had wall lighting here and here, that we could take care of this area of the parking lot, the same on the side of the building. So we weren't indicating any light poles,
We will
so to
have,
speak.
we will have, based off the architectural drawings and everything, a security plan that we'll be able to submit to you that will show you all lighting, camera angles, everything that, you know, would apply to this facility.
Why is the addition twice the height of the original building?
Space.
So you'll be working 2 levels?
It's for cultivation space. That, the only purpose of that back building is to advance our cultivation space and to expand, to allow us for a second retail store or to do wholesale sales. The original facility is really only big enough to supply that retail store.
And is your proposed operation similar to what's happening at Tremont Nail Factory?
So the Tremont Nail Factory is a manufacturing-only facility. They have a 15,000 square foot facility, but they're only manufacturing.
So they would sell to you, for example, for retail?
To manufacture.
So they would buy product, wholesale product on the market from other cultivators
And from you
or
also?
from their own cultivation facility, which is typically what they do. And they extract the product, and then they sell it to retail stores, which they typically own as well, under a different name.
So you do both?
We do everything under one roof, full vertical. We supply our own demand, we rely on no one.
Joe, could I ask a question? Bill, do you have a letter of denial from the building inspector? I didn't see that in the package that I got today, or Thursday.
A letter of denial?
You're supposed to get a letter of denial before you can get to the Board of Appeals for a variance. In other words, what you've got there, if any way does not comply with the zoning regulation, the only way you get before the Board of Appeals is to have the building commissioner write you a letter that says this is non-compliant, but you can ask for a variance to this particular article by going before the Board of Appeals. You just can't submit an application to the Board of Appeals.
So I need to go in front of building first?
You need to supply him with a set of the plans and get a denial letter from him saying that you're non-compliant with your plan set.
Okay.
Is that use special permit zoning?
Yes, that's special permit,
The zoning board.
the zoning board.
So how would that process work?
You make an application to
Yeah.
the building department and
Give him a
submit the
copy of the-
plans, and he'll review them.
So I need to submit for a building permit and they have to deny it?
It's a very clever bureaucracy.
It's
Yes, I love it, I
pretty-
love it.
It's reasonably routine with Dave.
It makes sense, I get it.
And that way
Yep.
from Sierra One, as far as I know.
Makes sense, no, it does. Any other questions?
So what I heard from the board is that the building materials, the visual buffer on the west side, and that there's,
Windows.
and windows.
If I may, I would ask you to ask your architect
Mhm.
to consider arranging the mass of the building, they'll know what I mean, so that there is some proportion and scale to the 111-foot facade, which right now is a flat wall. They'll know what I mean, but it would help the ambiance and the...
Follow you.
Okay,
Follow you.
thank you, thank you.
I know the screening, as you pointed out, the screening between you and Wooden Boat is pretty thick. Some of it's on that property, and some of it's on Wooden Boat's property.
The bogs are Makepeace, but
Correct.
The Makepeace.
they don't need an easement on this property to get to that.
No.
It's all between you and USDA?
That was, yeah, through the other.
Yeah, that was solved.
That was accommodated through the other site plan.
Yeah, they worked out their access through the USDA site to get like harvest berries off and, access for the foreman and things of that nature.
So any other notations or?
I'm not an agricultural guy, but do you use a pesticide or treatment on these plants?
No, the state is very heavily regulated. I mean, there's a lot worse pesticides being sprayed on those bugs than we can use on our plants, I promise you that.
Okay, because they're very particular on cross-pollination with those bugs.
Yes.
So as long as everything, you have a discharge tank, what happens to the wastewater? You're using
So-
reverse osmosis?
Yes, we're using reverse osmosis because we have to start with a zero base, because honestly, if we use the water, even if it was from a well in Wareham, it would test negative for PCBs because of the cranberry bogs. So like I said, they're using a lot worse stuff than we're using.
Okay.
We couldn't use their water.
That's encouraging. We all drink it, so thank you.
Yes, I do too.
Not today.
What is the status of this hearing, given that Charlie hasn't checked the...
This is not a hearing, Emmanuel, this is a referral. The
Referral,
Board
sorry.
of Appeals is the one that holds the
What
hearing.
is the status of it?
It's
Do they come back?
they're gonna be coming back to the Board of Appeals for a public hearing.
No, but we don't have Charlie's input yet.
No, but the Board of Appeals will. If you wanna have
We-
Charlie's
we don't-
input,
We don't get it?
I'll
You-
copy you.
you
I'll
can
copy
be
the
copied
board.
in.
But I think the zoning board of appeals, since they're the special permit granting authority, they also become the site plan review authority in this particular one. So Charlie will be Charlie will be conducting the review for the ZBA.
But it'll be public documents, so the planning board can receive
Thank
it as
you.
well, too.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll also copy this board, because you're the ex officio site plan review board that gives a referral to the Board of Appeals in terms of a written comment or things that you'd like to see implemented into their approval. So it's not like you'll be kept blind, but
No,
between now and the end of the ZBA public hearing, I believe you have a statutory amount of time to get comments into them, and it has to be based on the information that you see.
so we will then discuss this again amongst ourselves.
You can.
I think you have to.
Okay, do they have to come back?
If you have questions for them, you could invite them back, but if you just,
Thank you. So it all depends on what Charlie tells us. In a way.
do they have a date?
Yeah, you do have a scheduled hearing.
It may include some of the things that you discussed tonight or other people have discussed, but I may have some other issues with it as well. But you will get a
I
copy
think
of my
maybe
review.
I'm not explaining myself. Before the ZBA rules, they have to hear from us again.
Provided you get the information to them with the allocated time that you have according to the regulations. I believe you have a 30-day period in which to get that information to
In
them.
a hurry.
So you just need to be sure you get it in, otherwise they won't have any reason to even review it, probably.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Very good. Just,
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Next item is the status of Bay Point Phases 2, 3, and 4.
Just wanted a quick note to the board that, since this is of interest, what we've done is received a note from Bay Point, from the developer, asking for a meeting with Charlie and myself to go over the applications that they're going to be submitting. So they have not submitted an application as yet.
Good. Next item.
Claire's up next.
Hmm?
Claire's up next.
Who's up next?
Claire.
Oh, son of a gun.
Just with, if I may, with respect to Bay Point, I won't be reviewing the plan until I've given a cost estimate. That's the second one that I got last Thursday, and I haven't had a chance to look at the information to see how much time it's gonna take. So I don't have a problem meeting with them informally, but it won't be with the expectation that they're gonna get any information from me on the plan review. If they've got general concerns with respect to the process of filing the application or the procedure to follow, I mean, we could talk about that. It's in the statute, it's in the zoning bylaw, it's in the subdivision rules and regs. But I don't feel it would be in the best interest of this board for me to be suggesting plan changes or anything like that until I've actually reviewed the plan properly. I'd be happy to meet with them on an informal basis, so long as it's general in terms of what they're looking for.
I think the idea is to try to get resolution about what applications they're actually filing.
Is it another set of modifications on phase two?
Yeah, there's a modification of phase 2 that they're proposing, and there's a new phase 4. It wasn't reviewed under the original conceptual plan.
Do we have any sense of what the modifications are? Is it architectural or?
They had actually presented them previously
Oh, okay.
to
Is it,
the planning board.
is that set we're looking at? All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Next, we have a discussion with the town moderator on zoning articles.
Feels funny to be on this side. Thank you for having me, and it's not particularly zoning articles, but one of the things I have tried to do as moderator is to try to make improvements to town meetings so that it flows a little better, works a little better, goes a little smoother. One of the things I think we've come a ways. We've gone from 6 nights down to 1 or 2 nights, so I think, we're getting there. There are still some things I'd like to try if I'm elected and go forward. But I think where we're dropping the ball is in town meeting prep. And a lot of times what happens, and I don't know how familiar you are with the timeline of how your warrant articles have to go in, but according to the charter, the warrant closes 45 days prior to town meeting, the commencement of town meeting. And the issue becomes, the very first night of town meeting is actually the day of the election, which is August 2nd. So when you count back 45 days to get your warrant articles in, you're looking at sometime in February. What happens is we come out of the October town meeting and we get into November, Thanksgiving, and then the holidays, and then the town administrator is working on budget. And things kind of get set back where no one's really paying attention to getting these warrant articles prepped and ready in time to get to the selectmen when the warrant closes in the beginning of February. They also have to get to the Finance Committee 35 days ahead of time. So what I have been seeing is that we're getting a lot of warrant articles put on the warrant as placeholders, and they don't really have full information. And what's happening is when it comes time for the Finance Committee to make their recommendation, they don't have all the information that they need. And so if you look at some of the past Finance Committee handbooks that they hand out, a lot of times what we're seeing, and it's becoming more frequent, is not enough information to make a recommendation. So it's been a little frustrating, I think, to them, also to me, that the week before town meeting, we still don't have motions ready because we don't have the information to do the motions. There's still meetings that happen on the day of town meeting, the afternoon of town meeting, at 6 o'clock just before town meeting, and then sometimes I get handed things and I'm frustrated to have to look and see, is that within the scope or not? And, and there's so much going on between 6:30 and 7 o'clock that sometimes it gets very unsettling to me as the moderator. It's like, okay, the nerves start coming on. So I've talked with the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, with the town administrator. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and especially in your case with warrant articles where you need more time, is maybe changing the date of the election, which right now would be April 2nd, and moving that out until the first Tuesday in May. And then that does not become the first day of town meeting. Now, most towns, that's the way they do their elections, is after town meeting. So now what we would be doing is counting back from April 24th, or the fourth Monday, 45 days, which now puts us back into March. And that's going to give you, or give department heads, almost 3 to 4 weeks to be able to get their warrant articles together and have the necessary information that can go into them. And I know I have oftentimes said we don't want to put too much into a warrant article because it limits the scope. But on the other hand, it's very frustrating for me, and I look back to when we used to go to town meeting years and years ago, walking into town meeting and having somebody hand me a piece of paper and say, oh my gosh, I got to vote on this, and I got to sit and read it. So if we can move things back a little bit, that might give you a little more time, that might give department heads a little more time, so that we can better prepare warrant articles for the voters so that they have more information. So I just wanted to run it by you and see if that's something, you want to have a discussion about, that you want to think about. But I think in your instance, especially with zoning articles, having to be able to have your hearings not a week before town meeting, but maybe 3 weeks before town meeting, so that when it comes time to put that motion together, we have all the information that's needed. Because if you've had an article that you put on the warrant, and then you have to have a hearing, that would give you some time to have your hearing and then prep your motion so that you've got all the information in it. You know, we're also seeing a lot of motions that say, as printed in the handout. Most towns don't have any handouts. Their stuff is all done in the warrant article. So it's just something I wanted to let you know what the discussion has been going on in the past couple weeks. How do we, you know, we seem to have moved to make town meeting a little better, but how do we make the preparation so that we're better prepared and not doing things at the last minute?
I share your frustration, especially with articles that we did not generate. You know, we were faced with articles from other agencies that one of them, we didn't see the final version till an hour before town meeting. And yet we're asked to stand on town meeting floor and defend these articles. So I do, as they say, share your frustration. It was very nerve-wracking. We used to have a public hearing, and then it was never enough time to hold a second one to advertise your changes. So you try to do that in the form of a motion. Small changes, nothing major, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside, and articles are being rewritten between the hearing date and the town meeting, and it's getting a little out of control, as you say. So from my point where I have to stand up and represent them, I'm glad to help you any way I can.
Yeah. One of the other things too, Mr. Chairman, is, you know, when I ask for a report and you very nicely stand up and say, you know, you voted in favor of it or not in favor of it, maybe perhaps if we can expand upon that and give the reasons why the board is making the report that you're making, I think that would be helpful to the people as well, that we support it because, and then give you reasons why it's really good going forward and what it's going to do. And I think that gives the people, the voters sitting there who haven't probably seen this article, a little bit more information that they can make their decision. And again, I can go back to, and I hate to put Charlie on the spot, but I'm going back many, many years that when Charlie would stand up on town meeting floor and he would explain his zoning article, and we always waited for him or Mrs. Lincoln or, you know, one of the people that you always relied on that knew what was going on would stand up and give you some information about that, particularly a zoning article. My mind was changed often by the information that came forward. So I think, you know, I think we need to do a better job of helping people make the decision, because most people, the average citizen, they don't understand it, and they just come in and they rely on people who do know what's going on to explain it to them and help them to make their decision. And that decision, for the most part, is made that night in recent years, because we're not getting the information out to them sooner. So going forward, that's...
And the handouts aren't very practical when you're sitting in the dark room.
Yeah,
trying to-
when you've got 5 or 6 things to look at, you can't possibly read them. So it's been frustrating to me, and I'd like to see going forward that if we can help the voters in any way become better informed, and especially on zoning articles and articles that have depth to them, that I think we need to do that. It's a challenge, I know, you know, with the time frame that we have now, but again, you know, that's something that we want to look at. And I think if we move that election out to May, then that's going to give you almost a whole month. And one of the things in my discussion said, well, just because we moved the date, I hope you'll do your work ahead of time and not wait till the night before. So we, you know, we need to have that, that assurance too, that, you know, even if we move it out, people aren't going to wait till the last minute. But, you know, especially the Finance Committee, I think they need to have the information so that they can make these decisions and recommend to the body, you know, the impact that it has or not. And with your board as well, that your recommendation and input, I think, is very valuable to the voters.
I think one of the things, a couple of things. One, I really like the idea of changing the election back to the, given the extra few weeks to do the analysis that we need to do on this board, and to make the proper recommendations. I would also like to see if and this happens in a lot of other towns, where the planning board will actually have their recommendations included in the warrant. And so having that information on the zoning articles, the recommendations of the planning board after your deliberations included in the written warrant that's handed out, I think is very important, and it really helps a lot, because zoning is really tough. to understand. for a
And
lot
that,
of
and that
people.
would mean that the finance committee needs 2 weeks before town meeting to go to the printer, so your recommendation would have to be in sooner rather than later to be included in that printed version.
How does the change in the election date affect the date for zoning or any warrant article to be included? You'd have to change the town meeting date back, wouldn't you, in order to get the extra time?
No, because the election day by charter is actually the first night of town meeting. So if you change that in the
Oh, I see what you're
charter,
saying. I
it
see.
doesn't have
All right.
anything, the first night of town meeting will be the fourth Monday, whenever that falls. So you're
All right.
counting back from the
Okay.
first night
All right.
of town meeting.
Yep.
So that gives you a good 3.5 weeks.
Well, one of the things that I've found, and especially this last go-around that we had, was that once the planning board has an article to advertise a public hearing for, it seems to me that unless the changes to be made in that article based on the planning board's decision are very minor, and don't change the intent of the original article that was advertised, that it shouldn't even be allowed. Because now you changed, it used to be, I remember, that any substantial changes other than money could not be made, even on town meeting floor, if it changed the intent of the article.
Right, according to the, and actually I have a handout on, if you, I've made enough for everyone on submitting zoning articles. If you can make minor amendments to zoning, and this comes up quite often at the Mass Moderators meeting, you know, how far can you go with zoning articles and amending them? And you can make very minor changes, but if there is anything major that substantially changes that article, you have to have a second hearing.
Yeah, and that's my point, in the fact that, like George has said already, changes are coming to this board within an hour of the town meeting. I don't think that's fair to the board. It certainly isn't fair to the general public, because who knows who might have read what in the paper as far as what the article is supposed to say. And now it becomes something that nobody has got any information on until the 11th hour. Besides that, this board has had discussions on planning articles recently, and they recognize that it takes time to really go through some of these things and to ferret out the details, so that by the time you get an article to go to town meeting, everybody knows what it's going to say. And that you can then go to the public hearing aspect of it, knowing that you have, with the exception of minor things, got it pretty well established what that article is going to be about, and why you're making the recommendation for approval or non-approval, depending on who submits it. But I agree full-heartedly that this board has not had adequate time to do justice to the articles that it's expected to act on.
And I think, you know, going back years ago, I was going through and organizing town reports, which I go back to the late 1800s, right up to 2017, and spent some time in the last couple of weeks putting them in order. And if you look through the old town reports, very few zoning articles came on the spring town meeting. The fall town meeting, purposely, I think, in the charter, was set up so that you went back, and if there were any corrections to the budget, that's when you adjusted the budget. But that's when you, and where you saw the majority of zoning articles, and that would give the zoning board almost a whole year, you know, to put things together.
Is that something that the Board of Selectmen would have to authorize? That they would only accept zoning articles, say, at the fall town meeting?
Well, they're in charge of the warrant. I mean, the warrant comes under their hands.
Right.
You know, that's, but if you look at who can submit zoning articles, actually, it could be the planning board, it could be community development, it can be, city council, board of selectmen, zoning, any individual who might have a stake in a particular zoning article by a petition article. And actually, I'll leave this if you all would like to have a copy of it. 10 registered voters, a planning board, a regional planning agency, or anything that's provided by charter. So, I mean, there is flexibility as to who can put them on, but, I mean, I think that's a discussion you need to have.
But who has the say as to which town meeting they would be allowed to be put in?
Well, the warrant comes under the hands of the selectmen, so it would be up to the selectmen.
So they'd have to set a policy.
They'd have to set a policy.
Another thing that might help is a little better access online to some of these issues. Last town meeting, people would call me and say, It says in the paper, text is available in the clerk's office. Why isn't it online? Or they go to the clerk's office and the complete text wasn't there. You know, it was, if we could do a better job of getting things online so people that do have an interest can read the text and have a little better feel for what they're looking at, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the warrant has to go to print in the newspaper at least 2 weeks before town meeting, which means in order to get it in by the deadline for the newspaper, it's got to be ready 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. So, I mean, there's a lot of prep that goes in, and, you know, it's a time frame that catches up with us all.
But even prior to the public hearing, if we could have the text up there so people could point out shortcomings or.
They used to print the whole thing in the newspaper, and I know today it's very costly to do that, but years ago,
You don't have,
you know,
you don't, the people coming up behind us don't read newspapers. So putting it
They
in the
do, they read
newspaper
it.
is a fantastic idea, but you're missing half of the public, because they just don't read them.
It's a sad day, Mike.
yeah.
But I personally feel that any print that's handed out at town meeting is wasted. The pace of information is so great there. If you take your focus off of who's talking in front of you, you're gonna miss the whole point. Even if it was available online, even if it was in the paper, I would gamble money to say that the majority of the people that are showing up there at that auditorium are getting their first dabble of information that night. I'm saying 75% of them are learning the issues that night.
Which is,
And they're drawing their conclusions based on the dialogue that's happening in the room. So I think there is, and this happens in other towns, right? I think there's a provision where, yes, I agree with moving the election date. The reason, based on this discussion at town meeting and articles, is that we can conduct a town meeting and then push to a larger audience during the election some of these important articles that are there. So we're not capturing the same 400 people that are sitting in that auditorium. We've now opened it up to a potential 1,500 voters because it's brought to the election platform at that point. And we really get a better steering of where this town wants to go. You know,
I don't see how that happens, Mark.
well, there'll be an
Got
election
nothing-
every
it's-
spring.
Yeah, but it's got nothing to do with the election itself.
No, this is just me, Charlie.
Yeah.
The folks sitting in that auditorium that night are the decision makers for the entire population of the town.
Yeah.
There's a second opportunity for people that weren't sitting there that night to have input on these articles.
I don't see how they can.
Why can't you put the question on the voting
But
ballot?
you'd have to put it on as a ballot question.
Put it on.
Oh, that's a different thing.
yeah, that's been a whole discussion throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that's a subject for a whole other night. One of the other benefits to move in the election into May is because, for example, like I'm up for reelection this term. If I'm on the ballot and I lose and someone else is running, that new moderator only has 3 weeks to get up to speed about what's going on and really isn't well prepared for that meeting 3 weeks out. The same holds true that if you've got 2 openings on the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Committee, well, not Finance, but Board of Selectmen or any other elected board, these people who have worked on everything up until town meeting, if they don't get elected, now you have new people who have not been part of the discussion or the process. And so, you know, you've eliminated input that's been valuable, you know, of people who have worked on that. So having it after town meeting gives those who are in office the opportunity to continue on their work through town meeting and be able to explain things to the public and why and the reasons behind it.
Regardless of whether they get elected in.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, it's only me. Makes sense to me. It's,
So, you know, I just bring it to
I don't know that 3
I-
weeks makes a difference to this board, because we would only have one more session in that 3-week period to.
Yeah, well, I mean, your warrant articles are due next Tuesday. So, you know, it's a short period between October and trying to get things done. So,
Where are
you
you
know,
asking us to
I
move it?
just wanted to bring forward, I wanted you to know what we've been talking about and why, and, you know, especially this board with your zoning articles. they're difficult. They're difficult to go through and to come up and have your public hearings, and, you know, I sometimes get handed, oh, we changed it at 5 o'clock at the meeting, and it's difficult for any moderator to sit there and look at, is this still in the scope or not in the scope, and what
That
do I
rule's a
do?
no-brainer. If it's not in 48 hours before town meeting, nothing gets changed. To me, that makes absolutely no sense to be sitting in the cafeteria making changes to walk into the auditorium to present.
Yeah,
That's not
that's the way
fair
it's
to-
happened for the 9 years, so.
Well, the fact is that somebody can make a motion on the floor
Yeah.
of town meeting as well and make substantial changes, and
We'll let them make the motion on the floor, and then it's heard, and the announcement is made fairly to everyone at that point.
well, that's what the same thing would be done with the handout or the 5:30 meeting, would be that they would be presented on the floor of town meeting, and they would have to present it so that the town meeting members could understand it,
Well, then
or else
the
they're
only,
gonna vote against it.
but then the only public notice is in real time in front of,
That's my concern, is with some of these complicated articles, you're really pushing the envelope on what should be considered due notice.
yeah,
You know, you can't ask people to vote on something that they just saw 20 minutes ago with some of these zoning articles.
So what is the timeline of decisions here? Are the selectmen gonna push the election over the next week? It's gonna affect our timeline, or?
No,
Wouldn't be
no,
for this
because you would have to, it would be a charter change, so it would have to go before the legislature, so it wouldn't go into effect until next year anyway.
Oh, next year, okay.
So, but, you know, and again, this is, you know, talking about it now and doing it because it's a year out before you could implement it.
Yeah.
And it would have to go through the legislature for approval. So I just, you know, I just wanted to be upfront with you and let you know what's been going on and trying to make things better.
Very good, appreciate it.
So I'll leave these, if you're interested, this,
Please.
you know, is just how warrant articles, zoning articles get submitted.
Pass them around, Clay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
And keep, run for moderator, stay. Thanks.
All right. Speaking of which, we have a discussion of zoning articles for the spring town meeting. I think when zoning articles were relegated to fall town meeting, it was because the load was lighter in the fall. So it was, but even at that, some of them didn't make it.
There were a couple of handouts. One of the things I wanted to do was allow Mr. Swenson to, representing the redevelopment authority, to present the concept of the redevelopment overlay bylaw so that the planning board can understand. Because based on the minutes of the meeting previously, when Emmanuel was noting in the minutes, there was a question about what is the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw that we're recommending. And that's where I thought it might be appropriate to have a presentation on that.
Ken, have you got an extra handout,
Handout of, yeah,
your proposal there?
Of the, what Claire just gave us, or of this?
No, your bylaw proposals.
Is this it?
Oh, yeah, I've got one. I brought one with me.
I'll get it.
So my name is Richard Swenson. I'm a member of the Wareham Redevelopment Authority.
Is this yours, man?
That's an extra.
Give me a second here. This helps. Ken mentioned, we're going to talk about the flexible multi-use overlay district proposal. And to that end, I wanted to start with just an overview of what it is. And what it is a alternative development approval and implementation process. This isn't your typical overlay district or zoning situation where you have lists of things you can do, lists of things you can't do. What it is an alternative process for running development through the town of Wareham, through the planning board and the zoning board of appeals and the building inspector and things like that. And the way we set it up so far is it's applicable for Wareham non-residential zones. This is focused almost exclusively on commercial industrial, none for residential. It has to be 1 acre minimum properties to use this. And I want to reinforce, it's an alternative. It's not replacing. It's an alternative process. And it's a two-phase process. It's a conceptual master plan done by the developer and presented and approved by the planning board at a high level. And if it gets past that, then there's a detailed project plan that goes to the ZBA. Now, the objectives for us doing this are many, but the key ones are that we want to implement an efficient and flexible process for Wareham commercial development, always in support of the master plan, of course. And secondly, we want to enhance the engagement and relationship between developers and the town, to get them engaged with us on what our master plan is and where we want to go, and have them come to us with high-level master plans that line up with that, and count on the planning board to ensure that they do that. We want to make sure that we have effective governance on this process, probably more so than we have today, using existing town agencies and processes. And important to me is to promote Wareham as a business-friendly environment, where businesses can come here and they have processes that are easy to use, easy to understand. They don't have to invest in very detailed proposals at the very first day that they come to any of our boards. They can come in at a high level and say, this is what we're thinking about doing. We want to talk to you about doing that. We want to talk to you about how that fits into your goals and your plans in this community, and work through those issues and get that concept plan approved, then go do the detail. As I've kind of mentioned already, the justification for doing something like this is that we find sometimes that medium and large scale projects can struggle doing what I consider to be almost a bottoms-up approach, with the level of detail required at the beginning and going through the project plan and the permit applications. Mark, you mentioned before, the building inspector having to deny to get to the ZBA so they can say, here's how you fix things, getting stuck in that loop a couple times, maybe finally getting the planning board referral and getting a building permit done. The flexible overlay, multi-use overlay district is much more of what I consider a top-down process. As I mentioned, a high-level master plan with planning board review and approval, planning board chartered to ensure consistency with the master plan. That followed by a detailed project plan with ZBA review and approval. And the ZBA maintains the goals that came out of that planning board's approval of the master plan. You have to keep that intact and with the current zoning regulations. That's where all that detail will come in place on that second phase. And then ending up with a ZBA referral to the building inspector for a site plan review special permit. This is what a master plan would look like in our proposal. It had a list of uses, design criteria, design standards, performance standards, and a concept plan. Planning board has approval authority, and the procedure would be what's in the FMOD rules and regulations with a 65-day approval window.
What's FMOD?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the name of this overlay district, the Flexible Multi-Use Overlay District.
I can't say it, so, I know, you told
We
me.
should get a better acronym. I think.
Yeah. And then the second phase, the project plan, is the site plan, the architecture, the uses, the phasing, if there is such, or a schedule. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the approval authority. The procedure will use the site plan review special permit process in Article 15. There may or may not be additional requirements on Article 15, over and above Article 15 by the flexible multi-use overlay district. And again, with a 65-day approval window. So we're here tonight to talk to you about the concept, where we're going, what we think we want to do. With that, our next steps that we're looking at is to get an article placeholder from the selectmen for the Springtown meeting, a planning board public hearing, and based on the results of that hearing, tune the FMOD article based on that feedback for the town meeting warrant, get it in the hands of the Planning, Finance, and Board of Selectmen committees, and then have it on the warrant for the Springtown meeting. That's a, pardon me?
Wow,
Wow, what?
Seems like
a lot to do.
Well, it's pretty normal. I think that if we get a plan, I think the key is going to be to get a planning board public hearing done and go through the results of that and see how it lines up and what type of changes, if any, are necessary. But other than that, then we'll submit it and get it to all the boards, and it'd be pretty much business as usual.
When can an applicant come in front of us? Immediately after spring meeting?
By state law, when the town meeting votes on the article, the zoning applies. However, there is a risk involved that the Attorney General might disapprove of the article, in which case it no longer would apply.
Why does your board feel that it's appropriate to split this up so that the planning board has one section of it and the ZBA has another?
One of the reasons is because the ZBA has the ability to vary the regulations. And if there's something that comes up in the detailed planning that wasn't considered in the master planning level, then the ZBA would have the authority to modify the
So
regulations.
between now and when the warrant article is supposed to be ready, we're supposed to, or you're supposed to put together the requirements that the ZBA would consider and that the planning board would consider. This is sort of an overview of what it will be, but aren't you going to have some detailed information? How are you going to do that in 3 weeks?
Sounds like a lot of work to accomplish.
It's too much. You can't.
Having heard you, I'm sorry, you want to answer?
No, please go ahead, man.
Having heard your presentation, you've said so much. I think it would be helpful if you start from the beginning and give us a chance to answer questions. I've written a few down, but I'd rather have them in sequence. For example, I saw the term design standards. Do they exist?
They'd be proposed as part of the master plan process.
Who prepares them?
It's prepared in partnership between the developer and the planning board.
We don't have a developer here.
Well, you don't have a development project either.
Right, so how do we, I mean, I thought that the design standards would be developed by us to present
Developer
to
would have to
the
backfill
developer.
into them, yeah.
I'm confused.
That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is in partnership with the developer to come up with the design standards and design criteria that's going to apply to all development within that, under that master plan.
I would prefer to see the developer come in, myself, with, these are the design standards I'm bringing to the table. These are the performance standards I'm bringing to the table. And have the planning board look at that and say, does that line up with the Wareham master plan? Does that line up with where this board thinks Wareham needs to go or wants to go?
I apologize, but I find that is backwards. I believe it is we who develop these design standards.
I can't hear you. Turn it on.
I believe it is we who should develop the design standards, those of us who are on this board, perhaps others who have input, but I may be misunderstanding completely the concept here. I believe design standards are necessary for the town. We don't have any, and we don't have any, and not having them, of course, there are a few meager ones in the bylaw, but there's no enforcement. So I'm thoroughly confused about the proposal, with all due respect.
That's fine. That's why we're here.
To hear that a developer is going to present us with design standards,
Well, do we have
It takes
design
me-
standards that we can give them to follow?
no, we don't, and that's what we have to do. This has been in our discussion here for several meetings now, and we are, you know, there's only so much we can do and do it thoroughly, so Claire isn't driven nuts.
Understood.
So we have to limit, but one of the main things that we are undertaking is a comprehensive design standard for the town. And to hear that the developer's going to do it, just,
But the development, but these would be design standards that you, as a planning board, are going to review and approve. And if you don't approve them, it's dead in the water right there.
that doesn't help the developer, because he spent time, he's got I imagine he has a plan that he wants to present. He spent architect, engineering time on it. He comes with the standards, because the standards don't mean much without some visual evidence or support. And then we say we don't like them, we will go back to the drawing board. I'm sorry, I just think it's backwards. I think that the design standards have to emanate from here. Sorry.
Could you go back to this board's approval? So step one in the master plan, one more forward.
I'm sorry, this one?
Right here. So content, so I just want to walk this through. Let's use Bay Point as the example. Bay Point wants to build 90 houses up on a golf course. It's in an overlay area. It's in a flexible, it's meeting this purpose. At this stage here, would they be putting a design in front of us, or they're just talking conceptually? I got an idea, I want to build 90 houses on the side of a golf course.
Personally, if I may, Ken, the answer is, it's more toward the conceptual side. It's not coming in with architectural drawings and blueprints and house layouts. It should be coming in with maybe Emmanuel, your definition and my definition of design standards are different. Mine are, this is the level of quality that I'm going to build into this product from a performance perspective and to a design perspective. And how we get to what that actually is, that's a debate you and I can have, but.
Yeah, I don't mean
Understood.
to be disagreeable about it. It's just that I understood the term design standards, scale. If we're going to be in Wareham Village or Onset Village, what are we going to be marrying to? Unfortunately, we might be losing the most important, the leftover, the homestead, the Toby homestead. We may be losing that, so there are no longer any guides.
Mark, did I answer your?
I just feel that an articulated set of guidelines, I am not prepared, unfortunately, but I could have brought you books from other towns that have design standards. They're well thought through regarding siting and relationship to the topography and relationship to other buildings and what a developer needs to be aware of. This is what I expect, hopefully, that we will end up with one day, one of these years. If Bay Point comes to tell us what they're going to be using, on what basis can we react and force them to react? And you said it's a partnership, but
You don't have that available right now,
what, the design?
the review of the design standards.
No.
You could, but in fact, what you did with Bay Point is a good example, where you looked at the renderings of the residential buildings with the garages in the front.
Yeah, they come back 4 times with modifications to what those buildings look like.
And
My issue with it is, you lose consistency and you start creating these one-offs.
Yep.
And it puts us in a very bad legal position because it's only a matter of time before one of them plays it against the other and said, well, you let those guys put up a steel building. Well, they brought a concept for a steel building to us. So my issue with this list here is, I think first, conceptual plan should be the second item on the list, the design criteria. But the overall issue I have with this is knowing what we've gone through at Bay Point, and I wasn't even here at the beginning of Bay Point. I stepped in, towards the tail end of it, when Mike was just hanging on to put the final vote. That's when I came in. This can't happen in 65 days. 65 days only gives us about 4 meetings in front of these clients, and we don't have endless hours of time to dedicate to one individual project. If we start with a concept plan, hey, I got an idea, let's build 90 houses on a golf course. Okay, let's start talking about it. We're gonna talk about it 2 hours at the first meeting, they're gonna come back with a set of drawings, maybe 2 weeks later, but realistically, they're gonna skip a meeting and come back. They're gonna need a whole month to generate drawings. We're 30 days ticked into this thing right now, and now we're under the gun to make decisions again. So, I think this timeline is off. I agree with the design standards, and lastly, I think it's good to get a feeler out to the town, but my feeling is, we'd like to put this into play. We can't take an applicant until 2020 on this thing.
Okay,
Question,
Take an application until after,
well, it's a
until
long way.
2020. There's no way that we could turn around from a town meeting in May and have somebody, I think, just knowing how we operate, there's somebody in the wings right now that knows this is coming down, that's gonna bombard us on June 1st with this thing, and we're gonna be forced to make bad decisions.
What does this do for the town? What's it do for a developer? What's it do for the redevelopment authority?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
What does it do for
Why
the,
are we doing this?
What is the upside?
because, and Bay Point may be a good example of where the initial kickoff and execution of that whole program got very, very detailed, very, very fast, and got slowed down because of that. I think that with the goal of the planning board approving the concept without the level of detail that I see that you guys go through every meeting that you do with architectural drawings and reviewing.
Well, there's a perfect example. You want to compare Bay Point? All through their process, they didn't do anything they said they were going to do.
Oh,
And we approved a conceptual plan, and they ignored it. So,
I mean, I'm not here to critique
Yeah.
how they treated.
but that's the way concepts go.
Understood. But to answer your question, I think it's most important that the developer and the governance of this town be on the same page right from the get-go. And I'm not sure that's always the case, and this is a process that we think may help that in the future and push the detail down, one phase, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's a real risk that, I think the Bay Point is part of our family and community here, and they were willing to stick it out to get to the end game. But there's a lot of out-of-towners that'll come here and say, you know what, there's 90 other golf courses within a 30-mile radius of this place. I don't need your golf course to build my 90 houses, and I'm out of here because you're making this so cumbersome on us to get approved. But to expedite at this timeline, we would need to have design standards that are very black and white in that we can say, we like the concept, as long as you meet these design standards and this criteria, we can accelerate this through. But having a dialogue and creating a design standard in the process is brings us back to Bay Point, is the flip-flopping back and forth.
Understood.
Bog us down.
One thing I want to be clear on is that in discussing this among ourselves on the redevelopment authority, we felt that the governance on this process would be probably more so than it is today, in terms of the fact that the planning board can say no right at the get-go. a developer comes in with his master plan, this is where I want to go, and the planning board says, no, we're not going to do it.
One of the things which the planning board would have to do then would be to establish some criteria under which they would say no. And without the details in the design standards that both Emmanuel and Mark have talked about, the planning board would have no basis for saying no. Plus the fact that if you don't have design standards that you can apply equally throughout the zoning districts that you're looking at, as has already been mentioned, you're gonna have a hodgepodge of stuff that will never come together cohesively, that will make the plan, make the town look as if it flows from one point to another. Not necessarily that you have to have a cookie cutter approach. There are many examples of different designs that can be applied. But if you don't have some sort of standards to start with, that you can sit down and say, look, this is where we want to go. And if you don't have the procedure established by which both people can negotiate, and if the board turns it down, that there is justification like that, because when they submit a denial to the town clerk's office, under a special permit or under the subdivision rules and regulations, they can't just say, we deny it.
Then how do we do it today?
You do it by looking at the regulation that we have, and you say, what you have proposed is not in compliant with standards A, B, C, and D that are written out. And if that becomes a part of the zoning bylaw, then you've got a procedure which can be appealed. If they don't like it and the planning board turns it down, who do they go to?
I would say, if
The lawyer.
If the planning board denies a project, who does the applicant then go to get relief from that denial?
I don't know the answer.
All right, well, that's part of the process that would need to be developed under something like this. This is a guideline to talk about and to look at in terms of what you might want to accomplish under such an overlay.
So Charlie, I'm a little confused though. If we don't have design standards today, and, let me back up. I'm hearing that design standards are very, very important to have, and we need to have.
Absolutely.
And
We have
don't-
that per each zoning,
Pardon me?
per each zoning category, like was said tonight. With the last case that was here, Emmanuel stepped up and said, the steel building is not
Yeah,
within the design standards, needs to be wood, concrete, or a masonry structure.
This is not going to, this does not replace the zoning bylaws.
I understand that. So we have, in that case there, we do have some design standards that
Well, I guess,
come into play.
we're back to definition of design standards in my mind. Your
I think it's, I'm just speaking for myself now.
Of course.
I've been around this game for a little while, so when things come like this, I think about what I've seen before and what I think is good to do. We've been talking, as has been suggested already, about making changes in the procedure, which would make it possible for somebody to come in with a commercial plan, for example, that would do exactly what you're suggesting, so that they're not spending money up front for a lot of detailed plans. That does happen now, and it's not good for anybody, because it puts the planning board under the gun because of the money that's been spent, to perhaps give a little bit of leeway on what they're going to say is okay. On the other hand, if they were to simply do it with a concept plan like what you're suggesting here, and it's made part of the procedure under the existing bylaw and under the existing requirements, it would mean that we could accomplish what you're suggesting to do without having an overlay. I have a real concern about dividing up the process to whereby this board only gets to see the concept, and then you're taking the details and giving it to another board that has never had the advantage of knowing the discussion that took place between this board and the applicant to start with, or why they got to the point where they did. In order for the ZBA to appropriately apply what's been approved, they would have to have a detailed document from the planning board that specifies everything they talked about and all of the things that they expect to be upheld by the ZBA. I think what this would do, if it's under the suggestion that you have here, would end up being a difficult thing to implement so that you got the benefit out of it for the town in terms of better construction and better approval of projects. But the planning board has been working on trying to get it more streamlined by having upfront discussions with the board before they ever get here, so that they're under no misconception as to what may be expected. Now, granted, there needs to be perhaps a lot more thought given to the details that would go into the design standards and architectural standards, so that people know up front what they're expected to do. I agree wholeheartedly with that. But I have a concern that I don't believe that there's anywhere near enough time to try and put together the kind of detail that would have to go into the zoning bylaw that would allow this process to work and proceed forward at this time. You cannot do it in 3 weeks. Impossible. Impossible.
In 2 weeks,
3 weeks, whenever the warrant article would have to be prepared. It's impossible. Too much to be
This is the
done.
same type of bombshell that was dropped on us last time meeting with the overlay. To me, it's a very appropriate conversation for, let's get it ready for the fall town meeting. But to turn this around when we got 1 week in front of us to get notifications in there that hurry up and, create, even if you called it right to the day of town meeting and it was moved till May,
still
again,
not enough
the only thing this committee has a hard commitment to is showing up here on a Monday night every 2 weeks. All the static that happens in between with emails and extra meeting and design plans they're all, of great interest to us in our hearts. But we can only stretch ourselves so thin here. Again, this is just Mark speaking. At the pace that I've seen this committee work, and all the decisions that go into from the other town committees, this is a fall meeting. This is start the conversation now, continue the conversation. It's an agenda item every 2 weeks from now until fall meeting, and we're going in this confident that we've got a good plan in place, and we can get this done. But I'm afraid that we go into this September and I know somebody's laying back in the wings waiting for this one to go through. Nobody's gonna cough it up to me, I'm sure of it, but this stuff doesn't get thrown in front of us unless somebody has already thrown this out around a coffee table somewhere. I'm just a little skeptical.
Richard, to your point, the idea, I think, has a lot of merit, but I'm seeing duplication. We are planning, and we will be submitting to Claire a pre-application review requirement that will go into the bylaw, which in a sense replicates what I understood you to suggest. We have noticed, just for the sake of repeating, applicants come before this board with completed construction drawings almost. They're not willing to listen to any changes or suggestions, right? You're asking them to redo a lot of work, and that's because we don't have a well-developed design review plan yet, but we're working on that. So we thought the first thing to do, that we can do quickly enough for next meeting, is at least create a procedure whereby Ken will be is notified of a proposed project, and the applicant it will be in our bylaw, knows that he doesn't do anything until he sits with Ken, members of the planning board, to review informally and conceptually before he starts spending money.
sounds like the master plan that we're proposing, doesn't it?
You see, we're replicating here. I believe, if I may, that should be in the hands of the planning board, that process.
Right now, we're 100%
Lockstep, okay, great. But I think, and we've been discussing this with Ken, the question of how soon to develop the formal design guideline. Will there be resistance to it by town officials, by town agencies? Should we do it step by step? And I'm going back more and more to doing it. We've got to do it with a design review committee that will have the basis for saying yay or nay to a proponent, as Charlie points out. And that's what we are starting to work on. Your recommendation is a little bit ahead of us. We're not ready yet. I think it makes sense to let the planning board submit this pre-application review requirement to hopefully get it into our bylaw after town meeting. And while at this, and this is all done, written up and ready to go to Claire. While we start working on the design guideline, and I'm more and more persuaded that we just have to do it and not do it piecemeal. It'll take some effort, but Charlie's been helpful,
May I ask you a question?
of course.
Comparing the zoning bylaws and your definition of design guidelines or performance guidelines, can you explain to me what the delta is between those? Because to
I'm
me,
sorry.
they're almost the same thing.
I didn't understand, I'm sorry.
We talked about design standards and performance standards as part of a master plan. And your comment was we don't, that you believe the town should own those, but the town currently doesn't have them. I believe, in my mind, those are almost equivalent to the zoning bylaws. They're one and the same almost. And I don't know what the delta is or what the difference is in your mind, what we're missing.
The design standards is from my view, are dictates to control or to guide the visual result of projects, how the project fits into the neighborhood, into its natural setting. It's a set of descriptions of how scale is to be dealt with. I mean, an example was tonight that metal building that was shown. It's hideous. I mean, come on. And as I said to the gentleman, the fact that it's been done before, there are other ugly metal buildings, that's okay, that's done. We're not going to repeat that. And in fact, already today, and I regret I didn't call out the sections in the code, but we have some. We are a long way from having a comprehensive design guideline for each district. That is the next thing we're going to be working on. I think, to Mark's point, it's too soon to implement any of that. If you could work with us, because I think that's got to be our next step, is developing that for each district, starting, even if we start small and augment it with future town meetings.
How long have you been working on this?
How long? A couple weeks, 3 weeks?
So it's just been brought to the light of day. Why the big push to get it on the spring meeting? It just seems like it's, it's being stuffed on the fast track.
That's certainly not the case. It's an idea, it's a concept that we on the redevelopment authority think is a very valid one.
I think it has merit, but
and-
if it's a good idea and it has legs and longevity and it's gonna do good things for the town, what's the problem? Let's work on it, let's refine it, let's get it ready for fall.
I don't have issue with that, but and I'll speak just for me right now. For me, bringing it here today and getting it in front of you, getting this feedback, hearing that you're willing to work with us, you have similar projects going on yourselves, you want to move forward, but you'd like more time to evaluate and study and collaborate on it, and maybe push it to fall, that's all incredibly positive to me.
Yeah, no, we want to work with you, absolutely. But if I may, I think it belongs in the planning board's province.
I hear that.
It's, I think tonight's it's a great discussion, and I think the case that was in front of tonight was a good example for us to have for this discussion.
Trade routes?
Trade routes.
Yeah, it was.
So,
Did you see me give Ken the
Yeah.
sign that we need, I said, I want to go next.
yeah, here's the lesson that was learned. 6 months prior, this overlay district for the Tremont Nail Factory was thrown in front of us. We
At
were
the
totally
last minute.
blindsided. What should have happened was the selectmen, the developer, should have come and sit in front of us, and we should have talked about the purpose for those buildings and why this overlay district was needed. 6 months prior, this overlay district for the Tremont Nail Factory was thrown in front of us. We were totally blindsided. What should have happened was the selectmen, the developer, should have come and sit in front of us, and we should have talked about the purpose for those buildings and why this overlay district was needed. This is a brand-new industry that none of us know about. The discussion on the HVAC systems here, the cross-pollination, the reverse osmosis that goes along with this, I don't even know what they're gonna do in Tremont Nail Factory. But somehow, we chugged that thing through and gave an overlay district and allowed a use inside of that facility without having any control of the design aspects, the performance standards that need to go along with that industry. And it all happened in the 11th hour. And I'll stand here and say that I took the floor that night because I just kept standing up there. But so didn't these other folks in saying, just let us think about it. Because once the decision is made, it's very hard to undo these things. My biggest concern with this thing is the design standards and the timeline. That being said, I think what you said is there's a mechanism to make this happen today. It is through the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's just a slow boat to China right now to get it done through that existing process.
I'm not suggesting that it should go to the Board of Appeals, Mark.
No, but if Bay Point came to us right now, there's a process to change the zoning purpose and to get a special project pushed through.
Yes, if they wanted to do something which was contrary to the current zoning bylaw,
Yeah.
they would draw their plan up in whatever fashion they wanted to, submit it to the building inspector for a building permit, and he would deny it on the basis of it not being compliant. That would put them in front of the Board of Appeals to consider that project. I see this particular proposal here is much different than that, in that it would automatically give them
Go to the denial.
the platform to talk about all of the details. And to do that sort of without having had the benefit of even being in this audience to see what you would be discussing about the concept and everything, how do you match the details together with the concept so that you know that you're getting the package that you really want? I don't agree with the idea that you should split the approval process. It ought to be with one board, and if they don't like the decision of the board, they do have an appeal through the regular process of a special permit appeal or variance appeal, and that's the way I think it should go in order to make sure that there's consistent approval. One of the things about making an overlay is that if you have separate standards for the overlay, and somebody can't meet those standards for something, but they still have a piece of property. For example, the limit was a 1 acre lot. If you go to some of the sections of town that are under the strip commercial district, you're gonna find a lot of lots under an acre. They're gonna be out the window. They couldn't apply for this particular concept based on what I see here.
Well, keep in mind, Charlie,
Yeah.
it's just a process. The existing process doesn't change, doesn't go away. People
Oh.
under an acre can go do their development just like they do it today.
But they couldn't do it under this.
No, they couldn't use this process.
Correct. So I'm saying, in a sense,
There's
that's,
nothing preventing an applicant from coming in here and talking to us prior to them drawing plans up.
that's
A
correct.
couple of people have taken advantage of that and
Yep.
saved some money.
And I think that it just, I appreciate the fact that you're before this board too. I don't sit on the board, I'm just a consultant.
Understood.
And I shoot my mouth off perhaps a little too
I'm
often.
pretty good at it too, Charlie.
Keep going, Charlie.
But I appreciate the fact that you wanted to come in and talk. I think it's one of the few times that I've sat here to see two boards at least come together and share some input and some ideas. So I don't say that this is dead on arrival, certainly not. It has some thoughts put to it that are very consistent with what this board's been talking about already. My biggest objection is splitting the approval process, because I think that you're gonna lose a lot by that.
So what would happen here? In step one, concept would be presented to us, yeah, it meets the design standards. Would you mind advancing to step two? Then we would send them on their way, they would create a site plan, architectural designs, and if it stayed with this board, we're now coming, their second visit to us is looking at a set of drawings, right?
At this point, it's going to the ZBA.
Right, and what you're recommending is don't switch gears at this point, just come back to the planning board, stay
Just
with one.
What I'm hearing Charlie say is we're proposing that the planning board refocus at a higher level and push the detail down to the ZBA. And I hear Charlie saying that he thinks that's a bad idea.
No, I agree, yeah.
Bay Point is another good example because they got approval of a special permit for 2 phases in that project. They're under construction for the first phase. They don't like the word concept, but they got a concept under the special permit for phase 2. It simply shows the number of buildings, the location of the buildings, the offsets to the lots and so forth. They still have to come back to this board for the details of the construction for a subdivision plan that encompasses that special permit. And it's because of the background information that has been developed already that this board is in a much better position to recognize what they're trying to do and complete under that project. Now, they're going to be looking at another phase as well as a modification of the existing phase. But if they were to do it under this proposal, they would come here for the concept, leave and go to the Board of Appeals, and the Board of Appeals would not have the benefit of the discussion and the reasons why this board made certain decisions.
I hear that concern loud and clear, and I've always assumed, and maybe assume is a bad thing, but they would be totally up to speed on the discussions and outcome and how we.
I would not.
I
would
think
not
you
agree
could-
with that.
I don't think you
So-
could make that happen.
Can I wrap this up? What I heard tonight was, you all are talking about a pre-application review requirement and how that can be utilized in your planning board operations. That's lining up very close with what we want to do. I think that there's a lot of synergies here with different words being applied and some of the detail as we peel the onion back, maybe a little farther than I meant to tonight, we're finding some problems, but I think they can all be addressed pretty easily. So I'd like to go back to our board, the WRA, on our next meeting and report back on what happened here and take you up on continued dialogue.
Oh, absolutely, and I have to confess that I don't really understand what your board does. I know the words.
We don't either.
I understand the words redevelopment authority, but I don't know what your functions are. And I would need to understand that for myself anyway, in order to make the back and forth more meaningful and productive.
Sure.
So, but I think we're rowing in the same direction.
I do too. Ken, anything that you want to add there, or did I say out of line?
No, I think you represented the authority very well in this regard in the discussion, and I think the idea of continued discussion is appropriate.
I do.
How do we do that and when?
Let us have a chance to talk among ourselves, and maybe you and I'll talk, or maybe me and George, or you guys can talk, but let us reflect on the feedback we've got tonight before I say anything, or before Ken is asked, I think.
Yeah, we'll work through Ken, sure, but
Do you have a method of printing out your proposal here that you have?
there you go. Hand it out.
I do,
He
yeah.
came prepared.
Did you bring copies of the article?
Yes, the text. The text.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
I'll pass it.
You got extra?
Thank you.
You have 2 copies.
The 2 different documents? Oh, that's the PowerPoint. I need a PowerPoint, I can steal Mike's.
Any other questions for
Another
me?
PowerPoint?
Pardon me?
You have another PowerPoint?
I do.
We'll have one for Mike Baptiste as well.
He's gonna have a lot of reading. Thanks.
Any other questions before I close this up?
We got a lot of other work to do.
Just,
Well, this was very helpful for me. I appreciate you putting up with me. My first night here in front of you all.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Richard, seeing as how I'm a town resident as well as a consultant to the board, I'd say, I'm a resident of the town and a taxpayer, as well as being a consultant to this board, so if I could be of any service to you and your board, if, with the approval, I won't get paid for it, because it's volunteer, I'd be happy to sit with your people at any time, if it's appropriate. I'll just leave it at that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Richard.
You make a motion to
thanks.
adjourn? Not even close, huh?
You have a handout with the proposed articles for town meeting. The first, section 530, was an amendment to 530 to add vessels, trailers, campers, parts thereof, ungaraged on any premises, and not be in the front yard. In other words, to treat campers, vessels, trailers the same way you currently treat unregistered motor vehicles. When this came up last time, there was a lot of discussion about vehicles and vessels and the like, which do not require a mass registration, like as unmotorized boats do not require a registration. Kayaks, sailboats, up to a certain size, don't require registration. Are they included? I guess one of the issues that I had with this was brought out in the public hearing was, we were told that this is only to aid the building commissioner in enforcement, and he would not be acting on them other than in a complaint situation. And one of the people in at the public hearing pointed out that even though he may be in violation and all his neighbors are good with it, and he'd still have a cloud hanging over his head as to when somebody would knock on the door and find him in violation, which there's probably a great deal of people out there that, might have an extra boat or, I also pointed out, a lot of people have multiple trailers but only one license plate. And, it's never been an issue, it's well kept or it's out of sight, but you are still in violation. We could adjust this to mention vehicles not, or maybe in the definition section, add the verbiage that vehicles not subject to registration or exempt, or define what vehicles or vessels are not subject to registration.
Does a vehicle that does not require a registration, like a sailboat, is it any less unsightly in someone's front yard than a vehicle that is registered?
I think in a coastal community, it's tough to say you can't have a boat in your yard.
Well, I think there's a difference between having it in your yard and having it in your front yard. I mean, I live in a community where you can't have a boat, period, in your yard. But we have one gentleman who has a boat, and we've made accommodations because he's made every effort to have it in the side yard setback as far as practical, and it's not parked in his front yard. And not that I'm a prude, but if I was living next to someone who had a sailboat that had been sitting in his front yard for 10 years, still up on the jacks, hadn't moved, paint's falling off of it, trees are growing through it, I'd have an issue with that. But yet it's something that doesn't need a registration, so it gets a pass.
You mentioned that, I thought of a gentleman that was building a boat for many years in his shed. It came out beautiful, but it did take quite a few years for him to finish
There
it.
was a gentleman down in Marston's Mills, built a boat in his side yard, it took him 20 years.
That steel trawler?
Yeah, the Lorinda?
Yeah,
Is that steel or ferro cement?
that was steel, I think.
Mr. Chairman, this is in front of us because it's a zoning issue,
It's a zoning bylaw proposal.
and we're doing this to help enforcement. I'm sorry, fellas, this drives me a little crazy that we could be spending time talking about design standards right now when
Right, when
we're
we're
not
messing
even,
with
we're
this.
not even the judge and jury on this thing, it's the selectmen. So it's a zoning bylaw that's gonna be enforced by the selectmen, and we've now consumed, we're in hour 3 on this one right now.
That's submitted by the Director of Inspectional Services.
So that falls under this board? Yeah, okay. Thank you, sorry. Okay,
So if you're ready with this one, then we can schedule a public hearing on it.
Well, it's the same verbiage that got sent to further study last town meeting, so either we have to adjust the verbiage or,
Or enforce it.
or accept it and present it, right? So what's the one debate right now, whether it's registered or unregistered? Is that what we're saying?
that was one comment that probably the major discussion was, this says unregistered vessel, are you gonna get in trouble for having a vessel that doesn't require a registration?
Yeah, I think it's as simple language, if required by law to be registered, you are permitted up to one unregistered vehicle. Then it's not the canoe, it's not the sailboat, it's not required by law. It's
Right.
just have as many as you want,
Yeah, you don't have to get involved in spelling out what is or isn't.
yeah.
Yeah, the point is to make it easy for David, right? We're doing this for him.
Right, he's just gonna know that a canoe is not a registered vehicle, move on, what's the next piece of equipment?
Right.
It's,
And there's plenty of stuff in town to deal with. You don't have to spend your time on a canoe. I mean,
Right.
a 20-minute ride through town, and there's more work for him than he could do in a year.
And part of the reason why he's written it this way is based on his experience in court and what the judges have been looking for in terms of support to his actions.
Shall we,
Well, to that end, it's already, unregistered vehicles already apply. And there apparently isn't enough teeth in that, so what's adding more to it gonna do?
Well, apparently putting in vessel was a very important part of this.
Well, I know there's a lot of boats around, but there's hundreds of vehicles that, in violation of the bylaw, that are still there, so
Right?
adding more to it.
I mean, if this is that important to him, why do you drive by a house with 8 unregistered vehicles in the yard?
So,
What's keeping that from being dealt with?
One of the things we can do is ask for building commissioner's presence at a public hearing when we want to.
I assumed he'd be in at some point, but
I think we did talk about that, if they have a business license for that,
Right,
They're
that's a
okay.
pass, right.
it's, my vote is just to open
I'm
up the
happy
public
with it.
hearing, and if nobody comments on it, put it in front of the auditorium and let them decide.
I'm happy with it.
So just add items not subject to mass registration or exempt?
Yeah. Not subject by law to Massachusetts registration.
Why give that to them? Why make it easier for them?
Well, let me
No.
ask you, it's
Withdrawn,
just a
withdrawn.
technicality, what if it's not your car? What if it's my brother's car from Albany, New York, sitting in my driveway unregistered?
It's still your
It's yours
property though,
now.
So it's the property owner's problem.
right?
The way section 530 is written in the zoning bylaw right now is identical to what you're looking at, with the exception of the last sentence.
Yep.
There's no change.
Well, it adds vessels, trailers, campers.
It says motor vehicle, camper, or trailer, so the only thing that, it was missing vessel.
Vessel, yeah.
Oh, I thought
No, it was just vessel that was added.
That was the only difference in the language, was the use of vessel. Other than that, it's the same. So if that's the only change, it would seem to be, it's
Pretty straightforward.
pretty straightforward, if that's what he wanted. And they did, in the proposed amendment, the last sentence of the proposed amendment is not in there.
And Dave is this Dave? Dave's right.
Dave Requena.
Yeah, I mean, he is the one that has to live and die by it, so if this is the way he wants it written, and it doesn't perform, it falls on his shoulders. Then how can he come back to us next time and say, I need help enforcing the law, I need you to do X, Y, and Z to the language?
Well, the
year
public's gotta
before?
vote it in first before, once the public votes it in, it's not his headache anymore. All he's is the enforcement mechanism.
Right, but he's the one that's asking for the verbiage
Yeah.
change.
I think people are gonna have more issues with the second paragraph than the first one.
535. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin again? That's more interesting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, to Michael's point, is like, it was gonna be a town full of fences here.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with the fences, I'd rather see them clean the mess they hide in.
What's the penalty? So David walks up, he says, clean up your yard. I say, get off my property. And what do? Put a tax abatement on them
He issues a citation against them,
against the property?
against the property.
So
And
it
it's
shows
a-
up on their tax bill,
It
like
shows
the,
up on their tax bill.
like the paper sign is gonna show up on their tax bill?
Right.
Now, I'm of the understanding that that is already in effect, it's just not being enforced, right?
And I don't know, I think that's a new,
No,
It's relatively new.
I was to say, Alan and I had kind of a heated discussion about that the other day. And he told me in no uncertain terms that the citations being applied to the tax bill was voted on and approved a year ago, and that we
Oh,
just
the
don't utilize it.
the citations, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would like to, that didn't really get written the way I wanted it last time was, they shall be concealed from public view by a fence or wall sufficient to cover the equipment or to shield the equipment, because
Yeah, but
to
that,
arbitrarily say 8 to 10 foot high fence, when you're trying to hide a 4 foot high pallet of bricks or something like that, it's kind of ridiculous, so.
well, what if a guy's got an excavator in his yard with
Yeah, sit on
a
a flat.
boom
Then
that's
he-
20 feet in the
Well,
air?
then he needs to
Move it.
have a fence high enough to conceal it, you know? You shouldn't have a piece of equipment like that in residential
Well, that's what I'm
zone.
saying, is the fence really the elephant in the room, or is it the fact that they got a front yard full of crap?
Well, that was part of the issue was, one of the comments was, you know, what if a guy is in a landscaping business and he has this stuff in his yard, you know?
But does it need to be in his front yard? If
that
he's running a
doesn't say-
business,
This doesn't say front yard, this just says public view.
so do you rewrite it so that it says behind the forward line of the furthest most building to the street?
Well, first you need a permit for a fence line over 8 feet, don't you? Isn't that a
I
separate
thought
permit in
so,
itself?
yeah. I think over 8 feet.
Secondly,
But
is if
not-
you live on a lake, you
I
only
think
have a
that's
front
only when
yard.
it's on a property line, Mark.
If it's a fence and it requires support like a structure, then it requires a building permit. Doesn't matter what kind of a fence it is. Well, I'm agreeing with Mike, it ought to be out of the front yard.
Yeah, I don't think it should be in the front yard at all.
You can keep the language in there, but say in any event, no storage shall be in the front yard,
Right.
period.
This doesn't limit you to front yard, this says concealed from public view, so.
Well, if they want to put up a fence in the backyard where nobody else really has to see it, that's one thing, but the general public running by the street, why should they be subject to looking at a tall fence that could crumble tomorrow? I agree.
What's the definition of public, though? Your neighbor to your right and left is public.
No, the public view is where you travel on the way.
From the street.
If you're on an
Essentially,
unaccepted road,
Then you're still
Basically,
within public view.
It's basically from your property line, if they can see it.
It's called the public realm.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was,
uh-huh.
that was one of the properties that I was thinking about.
Well, there's boats and vehicles.
Pardon me?
Boats and vehicles.
but in no circumstances on a front yard. Just add that.
Honestly, I got more issues with businesses in this town than I have with residents. I can't tell you, I drive on that Buzzards Bay bypass, that boatyard on there, it's got one more piece of junk boat every time I drive by it. It's businesses that accumulate this stuff more than residents. I
Well,
got
this
nothing in
isn't-
my yard,
This
so let's
isn't
just push it
restricted
through.
to residential or commercial. This is either or.
All encompassing? Yeah, but they would get a pass, right, because they have a business license?
It does say, which is not for sale or rent, so
You would think that if you're,
you got a piece of junk out there.
It's all, everything's for sale, right?
Yeah.
it would be
If it,
part and parcel of what you do, but kind of like a body shop. You have a yard full of busted up cars and you fix them and get them out of there, you know?
so, Mr. Chairman, I think we're discussing this amongst ourselves, but we really need the public voice here, right? So the hearing's gonna let us know whether we,
Well, again, this was one that was proposed last meeting, and it was further study.
Further study.
So what do you think needs to change here to make it palatable at town meeting?
And really, there is no public here to comment.
Well,
Further study, negative vote, can't come back for 2 years?
it wasn't a negative, it was a further study.
Look at the handout I just gave you.
But you could put in a provision for no front yard and let that, along with this, come up with a public hearing, and then people could comment on whether they thought that that was appropriate.
I have an issue with the front yard thing because some residents only have a front yard for storage. If you go crunch some of those houses up in Shangri-La that are right on the lake, they only have a front yard. There is no backyard to get to store the stuff into. It's a lake is their
Well,
backyard.
that's where a variance comes in, I think, Mark.
Well,
it'd
then
be the
I
same
think
as
we
any
need to
other
state
bylaw.
that there's a mechanism for a variance.
Sure, there is. You go to the building inspector and you request a variance from that section of the bylaw because you can't comply with it because of, in one instance, for a variance, it would say due to the size, the topography, or the shape of the lot. And if you can show that because of the size you have no way of complying with that bylaw, then you would be in line for consideration of a variance. So they still have a means of getting some redress to this, even though it says that you're not to have it in the front yard.
The idea of an unfavorable action on a zoning proposal would be that it can't be reconsidered by a city council or town meeting within 2 years from the date of the unfavorable action unless the adoption of the zoning proposal is recommended in the final report of the planning board. So the reason for doing it as for further study is so that it's not an unfavorable action, but that there's continued discussion.
Now, see, in the existing bylaw, it says, in no event shall any such vehicle or parts thereof be stored or located in the front yard of such premises.
That's what the
So-
proposal says as well.
But the
That's the
new
ungarage.
the added section is it adds, that's a little misleading, but it adds a provision to address outdoor storage.
Why isn't that section 531, Ken, instead of 535?
Oh, it could probably be 531. I think the original thought was 535, so in case there was additional sections on equipment storage. But it doesn't matter too much which way it's done in this case.
Was David unhappy with 5:30 as, sorry,
Has written,
as written?
yeah, well, that he wanted the vessel.
5:35, yeah.
5:30 is the unregistered vehicle
We're done
motorist
with that,
trailer.
okay.
And it was originally ungaraged motor vehicles.
What are we doing?
I think it'd probably be a help if if we went to a public hearing and had invited the building commissioner in, the inspector, to have this discussion with us at the same time.
Okay.
Agreed.
On the sign bylaw. Replace displayed on public, I'm trying to find where it says that. Oh, okay. And that was the one, 18 hours for one such one-day event, yard sale, open house, road races. I believe we did have some public comment on the 18 hours.
Yes, we did.
What was your recommendation, 24 or more?
I mean, you put out a sign for a road race, it stays out.
For a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
The Y that does road races and events.
So we'll need to, I mean, that is in the existing bylaw, but
I think that temporary sign they've got down there for Verilife is in violation of section 10.
it's in violation of a lot of sections.
It's in the public way.
It's on public property, the letters change too fast,
Yep. Well, it's too big.
Who approved it?
it's oversized.
No, seriously, that's in the historic district, right?
No, it's in the layout of Main Street.
Yeah,
It violates section 1110.3.2.3.5. Flashing signs are not permitted unless it has a special permit from the ZBA. Did the ZBA give them a special permit? Do we know?
They gave them a special permit, but not for that sign.
So anybody does whatever they want now, right?
I think that was at the request of the police department.
so.
It does
For
say,
public safety.
it does say exception, any sign under town control on town-owned property is exempt from the provision. Oh, boy.
How long will it be there?
I don't know if it was put up by the police department, it'd be when the chief says it's okay to remove.
We're talking about that, right?
So, okay, the next, the amendment to 1122, is that also the sign bylaw?
Yes, that's part of the sign bylaw.
That's,
This all amends A, B, C, and D, E are different sections of the sign bylaw that are recommended for amendment.
Ken? Do you-
Yes,
You have page 86 there of the bylaw?
yes, I do.
the table at the top, the middle column, the middle row, should that not be square feet? And the bottom row is feet rather than square feet?
Which section are you referring to?
Oh, it's 1126.1, 1126.1, dimensional standards for freestanding signs. And there's a table, dimensions, shopping malls, shopping centers, other commercial, et cetera, residential.
Yeah, I have that one. And your question on this was
Well, the
total outward surface of signs?
the bottom row says square feet.
Right.
Shouldn't it be just feet?
Yes, it should be, because that's ground clearance.
And then the middle row
Should be square feet.
should be square feet.
That's correct.
What's the purpose for the removal of 1133, Ken? Is it a duplication of what's in other places?
It says it's redundant with section 1119.
Yeah, okay. I would agree.
You can read and compare the two and decide which one is more appropriate. But if we go with 1119.410, we'll have to change the, as well, not only replace the displayed on public or private way with displayed on privately owned property, but also to change the maximum amount of time available to post the sign or display. And add in on 1126, this would be the amendment number F, or letter F, under this, changes to the sign bylaw, to change the table so that it's clear that there's minimum clearance of feet and the outward surface is in square feet.
I don't see 1126.
It's not there,
Oh.
as the suggestion in Manuel, that it be included.
So would it make sense to, in that 119 where you're talking about the off-premises directional signs, to go with 1133? I noticed that 1133.4 is basically the same as section 10 in 1119.
Right.
And it does remove the exception that any sign under town control or town-owned land is exempt. At least I think it does. Yeah. I believe it would eliminate that exception.
Is there the ability of someone sponsoring events such as a road race to get relief from that timeframe?
Just the same as any other provision of the zoning bylaw, it's relief through the Board of Appeals, isn't it, George? Unless you put a provision in there.
Well, there is some leeway for the Director of Inspectional Services to approve signs. So there may not be a need for variance.
In 1119, it says 18 hours, and 1133, it says 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, inconsistencies and,
But wouldn't, for the director to authorize something other than what's in the bylaw? Wouldn't there have to be some provision that gave him that authority?
That's what I'm looking for, some verbiage that, you know,
Because he's the administrator of the bylaw.
you know,
So if it's not in here that gives him authority to, under certain circumstances, make adjustments, he's gotta go by what the bylaw says.
a phrase saying, you know, building inspector or building commissioner has the ability to waive time limits for special events,
Yeah,
adjust time limits.
yeah, perhaps for good cause, or some such language as that.
Did David approve the Very Life sign?
I don't know.
That thing is in violation in many sections.
It does say under this section 10 in 1119, though, that any sign under town control or town-owned land is exempt from the provision, so
But they don't own the Very Life sign. The town doesn't own it.
I don't know, maybe they do. I don't know.
Might have come from the state, we don't own any
Why-
signs like
why-
that I know of.
Why would we pay through our tax dollars to advertise marijuana?
Well, that's a good question. But there's a similar one up on the front lawn of the police station.
No, that's the directional sign. I'm
Yep.
talking about the.
So was the Very Life sign that was
So
down
is the one
there
on Main Street,
on
that's
Main Street.
There's
given
one there too?
directions.
There's-
At the time it had the directions to Waterways.
You're talking about the flashing signs.
Yep.
I'm talking about the Times Square sign, Very Life, Very Life, Very Life, that you see coming down Main Street.
At one point, it was a directional sign because it
It
included,
does alternate, it gets Very Life, and then it says shuttle parking, Tremont Nail, Elm Street.
I disagree with it. I don't approve of it being there, but that's just my personal
Oh,
opinion.
no, we're citizens. I don't have to look at that stuff driving down Main Street.
Yeah.
It is in violation of Article 1110.3. It should be creative and distinctive, compatible with the surrounding area and surrounding architecture, and appropriately sized in its context and easy to read. Well, that's for sure, that's easy to read.
Listen, Emmanuel, you smoke enough of that stuff, you don't even see what that sign says. You just smoke number jar 15.
Maybe we can stick to the zoning amendments.
Yes. Well, that's
Oh, that's an enforcement issue.
why isn't this being enforced?
Well, you know, you've hit on a point here that, to me, there's a lot more in the sign, in Article 11 that should be reviewed and maybe reconsidered, rewritten in some ways.
Well, I think we should have David helping us rewrite it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because then we can ask him
I don't know
specific
that one's
questions.
coming from David, but
No, it came from the selectmen.
And excuse me, it should reduce the potential distractions and obstruct. You're driving down Main Street, there's nothing more distracting than that.
Is that an amendment you want to make to the zoning bylaw?
Pardon?
Is that an amendment?
No,
you
I want to
the
make an
zoning bylaw?
amendment to the sign, the Very
Well-
Life sign.
well, I think they will just tell you it's a traffic sign put there for,
For
Public
safety
safety.
reasons.
At least let's enforce what we have here. Yeah, David should come in. All right, Ken, I'm sorry, go ahead. Can we call David tomorrow and find, I'll call him tomorrow, that's fine. If he'll take my call.
well, I think Alan would have more input on that.
Yeah, this is Alan Slavin's
Really?
recommendation. Yes,
I thought David was the enforcement officer.
he is. If you want to talk about enforcement, you want to talk to Dave or Quina.
do they
Now
need
it
us?
says, they want to amend 1135. Such signs may be placed 30 days before the actual election date. I'd make it 15 days.
Political signs by state law can be up to 30 days.
Well, then why is it in our bylaw?
Okay.
Does this include the changes that we talked about before? 1135, we had crossed out political signs and said temporary signs.
Yes, that's,
I guess,
Well, this references an election date. It doesn't say political signs, but it references election date, so.
Well, we took that out because that's the way the old one reads. What we said was such signs shall be removed within 7 days of the completion of a posted event. So that it could be temporary signs and just not be political signs. That's
Existing
what you
says
talked about
7 days
2,
of
3 weeks
posted
ago.
election results.
Yeah, but I remember the discussion. He's
Because I
right.
crossed it out, I wrote in the
changed it.
temporary,
Yeah,
we changed
We
that.
changed it to temporary.
We kept the rest of it for item 1, we kept for the size of it, for 6 square feet. And 3, we changed that signs shall be removed within 7 days of completion of the posted event. So that includes political signs.
Or road races or
Anything.
whatever else. So any specialty event, you
Yeah,
get
'cause I
30
remember
days
the
prior
discussion
and
we had
7
here.
days after.
Yeah, that's good, because that'll address the Supreme Court decision that
I think
said
that was the,
could be content.
that's what was behind it, Ken, because you had brought that up.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
is the zoning board bringing any articles to town meeting?
No.
I'm sorry, fellas, this just drive me crazy. This board is getting consumed with some political and road race signs right now, when we, you know, the matter that just was in front of us is what this board should be doing. It's just, I don't know why this issue is not being handled by the zoning board.
The planning board represents zoning changes.
And they make all recommendations to town meeting.
But if we're a planning board, we should be
Fun.
planning forward. This is a modification to an existing zoning bylaw. And the zoning board has the ability to bring it to town meeting.
Yeah, but
It's just,
State statute, Mark, that talks about the zoning, planning, all zoning articles must come before the planning board for a public hearing.
okay.
Well, I think if we adjusted 1135 to the language that you spelled out, instead of being 1135 political signs,
Yeah, we
Change
changed
it.
that word.
change it to temporary signs.
Yeah.
And signs shall be removed within 7 days of,
Of the completion of the posted event is the
Right.
way I wrote it down, just scribbled it into the
yeah,
book.
be it election or road race or,
On to solar.
but to your point, the addiction recovery sign that's tied to the Verilife sign is illegal. I find that ironic that you tie a sign, addiction recovery sign to a
To
pot
the
sign.
Verilife sign.
Well, your solar energy bylaw is what you had discussed before. Should be good to go on that.
I had a second thought about part of it.
Oh,
It's not long. It's why, last sentence on page 4, if the project is located in the screening on all sides shall obscure from view, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, why say at least 50%? It should be 100%. And
You want one of those 10-foot fences, huh?
Pardon? Pardon?
a 10-foot obscuring fence.
No fences. No fences. Vegetation.
If you go to, if you go to the next page, it talks about that particular thing being within 3 years of the start of construction or earthwork activities. Maybe the way to look at it would be that it has to be obscure at least 50% at the start of the project, and within 3 years, be
Becomes
100% obscure.
I buy that.
Yeah, I like that.
Good,
It must be
That gives
fully
time,
shaded.
that gives time for some growth.
good,
Yep.
good, okay, fair enough. Get that, Ken?
Yep.
Then the other question, and I promise that's all, I can't find it. At some point, we said may not remove more than 50% of a forest.
That's on the top of,
Yeah, that's right at the very beginning under tree clearing.
Number 6 on page 4.
Very beginning, right there.
Oh, yeah, why not 100%? Why should we be removing trees to put solar panels on the ground? I'm very much opposed to that, and I recommend making that 100%.
Well, right now, it says no more than 50% of the
Yeah,
property may be
100%,
cleared.
yeah.
You want no more than 100% of the property to be cleared?
Yes,
That would be in the wrong direction.
I'm sorry.
Clear cut that.
You know what I mean. It's getting late.
Would you, as I mentioned, would you want some clearance if they were to protect some forested land elsewhere, or
But we're deeding
if
it
they
to
wanted to exceed
conservation.
50% by giving us an equivalent acreage protected somewhere else?
But does that help? Does that help the abutters to the project?
No.
No,
I think the way we calculated this out was they were gonna need minimally 10 acres of property to meet this requirement.
It would, it might not help where you've got, like the one we had on Squirrel Island, but more remote areas where they're cutting down trees, 50 acres of trees just to put solar panels up. They could protect some trees somewhere else.
Yeah, I've seen that done in plenty of cases where in order to advance a particular project, that you mitigate it by taking something else and putting it in its place.
Yeah, but that would have allowed them to remove the 5 acres of forest in Squirrel Island Road, right?
Yeah, but they wouldn't have.
Well, yeah, but they wouldn't have, if this bylaw were in place, they wouldn't have met the 50% or 100% visual aspect. I think,
or the setbacks.
yeah, the first part, the 50% of it, I think addresses more to what you're concerned about, Emmanuel, and that's removing the carbon dioxide removal process that trees give us in exchange for a flat plain that does nothing. So if there was mitigation to maybe making sure that other land that the owner has will not be cleared or used for anything else except for conservation purposes, just, I don't say that that's the proper language, but something like that becomes a mitigating effort so that they can do it.
But the other land already exists, the forest already exists.
There may, well, that, you have a point there, but there may be other mechanisms or what, other ways of doing it that would make up for the fact that you're losing the potential for carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange.
What's the difference between that and going in and tearing up a bunch of land to put up commercial buildings?
Well, there is a difference, because you need to put up a building for a specific function. The solar madness is not necessarily productive. We're paying for it, and nobody thanks us for paying for 30% of it. But that's not the point. The point, to destroy trees, which are a natural resource, yes, they absorb carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. Do you eventually see our countryside being just sea after sea of glass?
Solar on these new buildings we're putting up.
Put them on top, put them on the roof, sure.
What
No.
about the parking lot?
I'm sorry, it's getting late. I just do not like cutting trees for commercial, for that type of commercial,
We got this one.
for somebody else's benefit. A building, you need the building. You have to house people, you have to house commerce.
An enterprise.
Yeah, but the solar energy thing is not, you know, it's been sold by political propaganda, in my view, and the price we're paying is losing our forests.
What stops them from using unproductive upland bogs?
They are pushing to put them on the bogs themselves now.
When we went out to the Tohonet Pond Road site, and they walked us around and showed us all the land they had clear cut to put the next section in, as we were leaving that site, we walked past 3 bogs, and I think it might have been you that asked about the future of the bogs, and they said, oh, these are all unproductive, they're just gonna sit there and look pretty for the rest of the time.
If they go unproductive, then they come under the Wetlands Act, so that they would not be able to be disturbed in any way, because they would then be considered as a wetland. There is a project that took place in Carver where they did put solar panels on top of a bog that's right on Route 58, side of the new fire station. And I know that there are instances where they can elevate the panels enough so that they can still grow the berries underneath. So it's not like it can't be done. I think it probably could.
I think the consensus among growers is you're not gonna grow any berries underneath the panels. You may be able,
Well, he made it
you may
very,
be able to harvest vines for resale and things like that, but to think you're gonna produce some sort of a crop under there is.
well, he had made it clear that they had no intentions of farming those bogs any longer.
But if they let them go fallow and let them go back to natural vegetation, then they come under the Wetlands Act.
Yeah, that bog across from Tony's Way on Sandwich Road, that's usually a pond now.
Mhm.
That's reverting back.
You'd gotten a memo from Emmanuel previously on the changes to site plan review, Article 15.
Yeah, that's all been passed. Everybody's approved it, right?
You wanna add a paragraph in there that
No, it's done. It's finished.
applicants are encouraged to come before the planning board prior to design to
It's in there.
discuss their project? Okay.
Yeah, that's the paragraph. Read it, Ken.
I was just scanning it over again to see.
The pre-application review, to promote better understanding and to avoid misunderstanding, applicants shall submit conceptual plans to the town planner for informal review to ensure that the requirements of section 1530 will be met. Participants in the informal review process shall include a member of the planning board as well as representatives of other town boards, commissions, and departments. In accordance with section 1565.2, that the town planner determines would have jurisdiction over the project. The intent of this paragraph is to provide the town boards, commissions, and departments the opportunity to become familiar with the concept and scope of the application, and to offer input regarding its appropriateness prior to receiving additional or advanced architectural and engineering plans for review in accordance with 1565.2.1.
Is that what the Walmart out parcel was doing last week?
That's right.
Attempting to do.
What were they doing?
Giving a preliminary look-see at what they proposed.
For that Ford Pizza property of Walmart?
Yeah, the corner piece.
What are they proposing?
Commercial
All
buildings.
Commercial buildings,
Did this take place already?
yes.
Thanks for inviting me.
With solar?
No, I think they were gonna have another meeting with you, though, to talk about architectural. Didn't they
Yeah,
talk
they
about
did.
that with you,
They
Ken?
didn't have any architectural
No,
plans.
we
at the
should
time.
look at the whole concept, the whole
Who do they
site
talk
plan
You
and
can do
all.
that, you can do that then.
Ken put out an email that said, you know, we could have a couple members of planning and a couple members of zoning. I don't know.
I don't remember seeing
I
anything
didn't get
about
that.
that.
What's the For once I got the email.
So they still gotta come in front of us with their formal plan, right?
Yeah, but here's a case of they're coming to you ahead of time,
Giving you
give you a look-see,
the big
And-
picture.
and see, you know, what they need to do, because it's a new owner that didn't go through the site plan last time. And they're trying to get a feel for what they have to do.
That's still Robinson's property.
Right. The whole thing is Robertson's property.
I didn't think it was, I thought they bought it.
No, no.
That was the impression.
Still
they
under,
gave me.
it's not a separate lot. It's still a part of the entire 25 acres. Walmart is under lease.
I think there's
They want
a subdivision involved.
a subdivision so they can sell.
They want a
part of the
subdivision,
other lots.
but at the present time, it's all a part of the entire property.
No, they led me to believe that
Do we
under
require,
new ownership.
a sidewalk in front of that new Liquors and More?
No.
Should have.
Just fall off.
They talked about that last summer with me.
The sidewalk, what little sidewalk there is on the other side of the street at Toby.
There's no curb
Yes.
on there. And,
Besides, on that particular site, you're liable to get hit by a delivery truck.
I went behind that building, and I think there's enough room for a passageway up to J.C. Penney's from behind that building, and
I don't think the Wareham Crossing was agreeable to that.
Yeah, I'm sure the guy that's in Wines and More wouldn't be agreeable to it.
We discussed it with Wines and More and Donnelly, or Donovan, who was doing that project, and they simply refused to even consider it because of Wareham Crossing. Didn't think they would go along with it.
Yeah, I think back when the corner site was done, Wareham Crossing was not.
Yes. Ken, could you just look at 1565.3 into site plan review and tell me whether item number 3 is correct?
In the existing bylaw?
Yeah. It says that parties of interest within 200 feet of the parcel should be given notice. Isn't it 300? It's
Yeah,
actually-
we go on 300, we don't use this because
Right.
it's a special permit.
Can we, well, shouldn't it be 3?
It should be 3.
Is that what we passed, or is that what we proposed?
With this?
Yeah.
That's what we passed.
We should have. Does that SPR mean site plan review, but does that automatically mean planning, or,
Yes, under
Unless
the,
it-
under the
unless-
regulations, it means
okay.
it's planning.
Manuel, would you have any issue with going ahead with the change to the solar panel bylaw, the way it's written?
No, we're
No?
just gonna add the revision we just made.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, it's fine, you know,
Yeah.
big improvement.
Yeah.
You know what else is very upsetting to me? On Thursday, the Historic District Commission is having a hearing on the destruction of the Homestead building.
Well, I know that's a sin.
Plans have been done, and the process that we're trying to set up never took place. And what's left of Wareham is this lovely, traditional, architecturally worthy property in Wareham, gone. So now the town becomes filling stations and empty storefronts. Why would anybody want to come to Wareham to open a business?
Because they would have a major hospital still in town, which they won't.
It's there now, it hasn't helped.
But
It's,
Main Street is still rotting. I mean, thank God for Café Soleil and a couple of other little people who are trying to survive.
But the most successful downtown main streets are the ones that have retained the New England character,
Yeah.
not the ones that have become shopping centers and
Well, even if they didn't it looks like they were able to sneak under the bylaw, because if you look at site plan review, the only thing that triggers it for a commercial or a non-residential is something that adds 10 or more parking spaces. So I looked at the parking area that they have side of the homestead, counted those spaces up, and then counted the spaces on the new plan, and they only added 8. So they didn't add 10. And there's no other provision in the bylaw, the site plan review bylaw, that requires them to come here. So the entire site plan, just do as they please.
And I
And
wonder,
there is no provision, nobody has the ability to save a historical building.
I don't know, I mean, stuff that we have done, we couldn't touch historic buildings.
I mean, if the
I mean, you can fix them as
the
long as you're...
demolition delay bylaw sets it up where you have to go through a process to try to save it, but there's been no mechanism for any agency within town to, if you were gonna pick it up and move it, who'd pay for it, where would you put it?
Well, that's the other option, there wasn't, that should have been considered, I don't think it has been. But anyway,
They want to get rid of it. Right? Now, is it the same for the historical commission as it is for this, historical district commission? Or it's different?
Those are two different commissions.
I know, but it's two different sets of rules for what they can do. One's a delay, right?
The
Or
delay,
they're both just
there's a demolition delay bylaw, that's correct.
for the district commission.
For,
What
for the historic commission.
about for the historic district commission? Just a delay, or can they say no? They can say no, right?
I don't know how they can. I think, and I don't remember the provisions of the demolition delay, but I think they have to have a plan.
That's under the historic.
Is-
That's under the historic, there's two separate boards, right? One's the historic district commission, one's the historic commission, right? The delay is under the historic commission. Just like the house next to, I guess it was your family's house that they took down, right? Next to the gas station.
Yeah.
That went in front of the historical commission. The delay, right?
I didn't follow it, but yeah, it has to go in front of one of them. But they have to determine a cost, for if they wanna save the building, they have to have a mechanism to do it. They don't.
Does the building have, is it a registered landmark, the building?
I don't know.
According to the
It is?
paper, it is.
National
Yep.
Historic
Well, then you
Register.
can't touch it.
You can. There's other places that they have. They're torn down.
The demolition delay came about because Toby Hospital tore another building down up on High Street. Just showed up, made it disappear, and property hasn't been used for anything else.
But after 6 months, they can just issue a demolition.
If you, say you can't,
I have to check on that.
There's two separate
Yeah, but
rules.
if the building has been granted historic, what's the term?
It's on the historic
National
register.
Historic Register.
Yes, it's my understanding you cannot remove it.
It's gonna fall down on its own.
It's not that bad.
But it will, it's not being preserved.
Yeah, it's a whole lot
at
of
least
money.
20 years ago, it was inspected and said all the carrying timbers were full of powder post beetles and needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, they've never been done, so I don't think you could move it very readily.
Didn't Paul Pearl do a lot of that work when he was in there?
He did a lot of work, but I don't think he replaced it.
Anyway,
But again, go down to the corner, jar number 15, all this stuff disappears.
will you accept the motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So how many articles do you have coming